Thank you for all who have joined us online and those who are in front of us. It's nice to see. Thank you for putting your cameras on because it is nice to see folks as well. Sure that I'm reading your faces, your input. That being said, Malia is going to be logging in and she's going to be answering the questions that may come up in chat. So please feel free to ask questions or raise your hand if you feel like you want to be able to ask a question. We can do that as well. So, and thank you all for who are in front of me as well. Not that I'm avoiding you at all, but you are right in front of me. So, and I'm always, I don't know how, I mean, the owl apparently will follow me wherever I go, but I just have gotten so used to trying to stay stationary. So I'm kind of staying stationary and I want to make sure my back is not to you ever. So I'm maybe pointing to the presentation. So any time along the way, please feel free to ask questions. I've got a lot of slides. Our ability to get through them, I'm going to say, is remote, but the details of are on the presentation from the handout that you have. And I did send Malia a link. I don't know if you could actually put that into the chat, if you would. The Google Drive chat, Google Drive document will be in the chat for those who are interested in getting the handout as well. So I have something else to admit. All right. So my name is Monica Meyer, and I have been providing training and technical assistance in the state of Washington for going on 20 years, and specifically in Kitsap County for just about that long. I do go across the state in different capacities, mostly on the west side, but I do venture over to Tri-Cities and Spokane as well. My interest in autism really blossomed when I having a son of my own who is an adult man who has autism and an intellectual disability and a intractable seizure disorder. So he's been my greatest teacher, greatest impetus for learning about how to support autism and those across the spectrum. I've worked with college level students and adults to small children, but I do like to focus my area of interest in schools and transition school to post-secondary activities such as employment or college. I'll be referencing my son Michael because obviously he's I know a lot about him. So I will have other stories that I can tell about folks that I will also embed throughout this training. So just start off with, just the title of this can, for some people, is a little provocative in the fact that all behavior is communication. And I know that to be true. And obviously there's scientific data that shows that without a functional way to communicate, people will communicate through their behaviors, positive or negative. So this is what I'm going to be going over today. It's just a little housekeeping, a disclaimer, and then training content. For instance, how does autism differ from an intellectual disability? How does it differ from a mental health condition? Other comorbid conditions, autism characteristics, skill deficits, implications of support, iceberg analogy, and what does Michael look like? And so this, like I said, this is the focus on all behaviors, communication, and understanding really the characteristics of autism will also help us understand what it will give us a hypothesis for understanding what that behavior is communicating. Ultimately, what would be really great is that everybody, whether they are verbal or nonverbal, had a functional way to communicate. And even though, as I get into this, there are a lot of people who are verbal.
I can't read it because of, you've
Oh.
got that little box in there.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. I will have to turn that off then. I will turn these off so that you'll just have to be in control of that then. So that, people who are verbal oftentimes they're not able to express their emotions. They're not able to understand some conditions. That what we want to do is not make assumptions, but always provide a way for a person to express themselves. And so here's my disclaimer, and it's a semantic disagreement, that autism spectrum disorder individual versus individual with an autism spectrum disorder. These issues of semantics are a hot button issue, which regional objections on both sides. In the autism community, many self-advocates and their allies prefer the terminology as autistic or autistic person or autistic individual because they understand autism as an inherent part of their individual identity, the same way as one refers to as being Muslim, African American, LGBTQ, Chinese, gifted, athlete, or Jewish. On the other hand, many parents like myself, autistic people, professionals who've worked with autistic people prefer the terminology with person first language. So I was referred to as a person with autism or an individual with autism because they do not consider autism to be a part of the person's identity and do not want their children to be identified as just being referred to as autistic when they are much more. But like I said, this is a semantic disagreement. They want people first language. So I will interchange both autistic person or a person with autism throughout my presentation. It's not that I am ascribing to one, I am, but I will not in my presentation. But I do want to be very respectful of people who either want to be person first or identity first. So let's get started. All behavior is communication. Got another person admitted. Let's just start with a question. Autism is a mental health disorder, a behavior disorder, neurological disorder. For those online, if you would put in your chat what you feel it's either 1, 2, or 3, or not or, and what do you feel autism is? Is it a mental health disorder, behavior disorder, or neurological disorder? It is a neurological disorder. Can have co-occurring conditions such as a mental disorder or behavior disorder, but in itself, autism is a neurological disorder that really is defined by the functioning of the brain. It's not by the chemical that is typically related to how a mental health disorder or behavior disorder, but it is about the neurological, the actual wiring of the brain. So the keys to understanding behavior is we need to really kind of step back and think, why does this person need to engage in a behavior? So we have people who, and I can tell you, over the last, when I first started working in Kitsap County, there was a residential rehabilitation center called Francis Haddon Morgan. Any of you familiar with that? It was one of the institutions here in the state of Washington, of which there were people with autism living, about 50 plus people with autism living together in an institution here in Bremerton. With that, I worked with a lot of people as it started to close out to transition people from the institutional living into community living. And just through my vantage point, most people did not have a function way to communicate and had been there, some of them since the age of 5 and 7 years old. And they were then in their late 30s to 50 years of age. So rather than, as we see a person who's engaging in a challenging behavior, we have to understand why. That on the other hand, some people think they need to stop a behavior and extinguish it without understanding the means behind it. What I'm going to be talking about is we know that behavior is a function of communication and that there's reasons why. And it becomes kind of a puzzle that we need to figure out. And what happens in the case of many of the people that live at the institution is that they have figured out the only effective, efficient way to get their needs met was to act in a behavior, because otherwise they wouldn't be paid attention to. In essence, 95% or 9 out of 100% of our time spent with individuals, 95% of the time, people are doing what we expect them to do. 5% of the time, people engage in activities that negatively impact the learning of others. And although it is a 95-5 disproportionate, we give almost all of our time towards the 5%. And oftentimes we ignore the people that are doing things right. That we ignore because they're doing it right. So why do I need to engage? So when we do not engage with a person who is doing things right, we reinforce when somebody's doing something wrong because we pay attention to it. Because behavior, as we know, have two concepts to it. One, to either avoid an activity or avoid a person or avoid a situation, or to obtain something, your attention, an item, etc. So when you think about those two concepts of either to obtain or to avoid, then that starts with the understanding of where that person is. And again, what we want to do is give attention to people when they're doing things right, and then helping individuals learn how to effectively communicate their needs, and that we want to be able to provide them with encouragement that, oh my goodness, thank you so much, that was great. So the key to understanding communication, the communication needs are when someone displays a challenging behavior, we really need to step back and we need to think, what's a person trying to say? If I saw a person give, let's say, I'm sorry, what's your first name?
Jared.
Jared. If I saw Jared stand up, go out the door and slam it, did he communicate something? Yes. Did we know what he wanted? No. But we probably thought, oh, he's either mad. We start coming up with a hypothesis of why Jared came out, stood up and walked out the door. Either he didn't like the content or he was mad about something else. So we had to figure out, is he trying to avoid or obtain attention? Because with somebody, some people would walk out the door and slam it with the hopes that someone's going to follow them and try to find out, while the others are thinking, I don't know what's going on. I hope he's all right. So there's, what is it that person is trying to say? So like I said, our job is to help them express themselves in a way that they learn how to get their needs met without needing to engage in a negative behavior. So first, let's just set some groundwork. Engaging in challenging behaviors is how does autism differ from an intellectual disability? And there are a lot of folks, like I said, although I've worked across the spectrum, there are a lot of challenges with people who, whether it's an intellectual disability or a learning disability, people automatically equate it to basically a naughty behavior or something that's not conducive to the environment. And they often just say, well, it's because they don't like they're not compliant. They're not being good. And in fact, compliance is, I've actually did a training just here recently that is called compliance is a 4-letter word. Because compliance, and I'll get into that here in just a moment, is we don't want our students to be compliant or our children to be compliant. We want our children to be able to express themselves, to be able to communicate their wants or needs. And so whether the person has a learning disability or an intellectual disability, we need to understand that autism is a different standalone disability from anything else. And why is that important to know? That we have autism cases vary in IQ range, just as I was indicating, with both below and above average test results. In fact, it's quite common for people with severe autism to have an IQ of 70 below, while some people who are considered severe autism with a high IQ. And while there is a small population are considered genius levels, sometimes people look at a person and what their affect is and not understanding what their intelligent quotient is. And even intelligent quotients do not give us a good idea of what a person's intellect is, because IQ tests are based on social communication. And what defines autism? It's a social communication disorder and repetitive behaviors. So it's a dyadic impairment. And so there's the Autism Research Institute by Stephen Ellison. He and his wife have really kind of pushed back on the IQ quotient because of how we do testing and how if a person isn't able to conform to these ideals, then we measure them on one way of instruction. And we have learned over years and years that people with autism, you just peel back the onion, peel back the autism, and there's so much that has not been tapped into. But this differs from people with intellectual disabilities. So you can have autism and an intellectual disability. You can have autism and can have an incredible high IQ or a savant-like type characteristic. So intelligence does not equate to autism. Autism is a separate entity all in itself. We know that boys are 4.3 times, I don't know where they get the 0.3 times, but at any rate, times are more likely to be identified with autism than girls. That being said, there are still, the issue of girls often present with autism much differently than boys. And most often boys have been the ones that have been researched. So that's problematic. And I'll get into that here in just a few minutes as well. So autism occurs, as we know, in all racial, ethnic, and social economic groups. The Autism and Developmental Disability Monitor, which is ADAM network, found no overall difference in the number of Black children identified with autism compared to white children. Although there is access to testing is much lower for students of color than it is for students who are white. However, the number of Hispanic children identified with autism is still lower compared to white or Black children. And again, the identification that oftentimes is because access to services are often compromised. So among children identified with autism who have IQ scores available, 1/3 or 33% also have a co-occurring intellectual disability, which is interesting because before early intervention services, say really 30 years ago, that instance was identified as at least 50% of people with autism had an intellectual disability. But because of early intervention services, data is showing that it has dropped considerably. So the value of intervention services, early intervention services, is great, and it's great, but it's not the end. It's the beginning. And so as I have worked with people across the age span, including my son, including all of us here in this room, we're all lifelong learners. And so are individuals that we're going to support throughout their lifetime. And it's giving them the opportunity to continue to learn. So the better understanding of the difference between autism and an intellectual disability, there are two terms that need to be understood. Intellectual ability, which describes the individual's ability to learn, problem solve, reason, plan, think abstractly, etc. And then there's adaptive ability, which describes the skills needed to live in an independent manner, including communication, social skills, self skills, etc. Which is interesting when you I think of intellectual disability, and often in terms of autism in particular, there are many people who have what is referred to as executive function dysfunction, which makes it really difficult for people to plan, organize, reason, and have critical thinking. So oftentimes it's really hard to kind of like splice this up and tease out what is the autism, what is the intellect. We know that autism is a developmental disability, not an intellectual disability that can cause significant social, communication, and behavior challenges. Basically, the diagram pyramid shows that autism has two critical columns or critical areas, which is a social communication with social communication deficits and repetitive restricted repertoires of behaviors. And they like to do things maybe over and over like a vacuum. Very, very focused interest. Learning, thinking, and problem solving abilities of people with autism can range from gifted to severely challenged, and sometimes everything in between. So when we really talk about a spectrum, it's really hard to measure a person's aptitude because I think I took the graphic away that for a person who has maybe a developmental disability, they have what is referred to as a global delay, meaning they pretty much are globally delayed in every attributes of their learning. As a person with autism, they kind of look more like an EKG. They might have an incredible reading aptitude and yet have no critical thinking ability. They might have word recognition and have no reading comprehension. So it's like, what is it? And it is just on our part to kind of figure out what is it about this individual, because I can think of a friend of mine whose son, at the age of 4 and 5, could read the Wall Street Journal, but didn't comprehend anything. He could just read it. He read every word of it. And so, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, he is a genius. He is a very bright young man, but he wasn't comprehending the text. And so that makes it really difficult. So when they were, put him in more challenging academic courses, he was not doing well, but it really turned out to be that he was not comprehending that, although he could read, the comprehension piece was far below his stated age. And then while some people with autism may need a lot of help in their daily lives, others might need much less. And interestingly enough, there are a large portion of people who are considered savant, if you, I'm trying to think, well, not even savant, because Temple Grandin is not a savant in the definition. She's a very brilliant woman. Has anybody heard of Temple Grandin? And Temple Grandin is a woman now. I would say she's in her 70s, and she has been really an ambassador for autism and continues to teach and inform people on autism around the world. She, at an early age, her mom was basically encouraged to put her in an institution. She was nonverbal. She had a lot of behaviors, and as it turned out, I mean, her mom worked with her very closely, very diligently. That now Temple has 3 degrees, and basically, I mean, her PhD is in animal husbandry. And what she talks about as people with autism is we can't limit what a person's abilities are based on what we see, because autism is separate from the intellect part of the individual. But it also, the curious part is the wiring and how the brain is able to collect information. And not only collect it, is the ability to recall it. So like my friend's son who could read, he didn't have comprehension or didn't have the ability to recall the information. So an intellectual disability is characterized by significant limitation in both intellectual function and adaptive behavior, which covers many areas of our social practical skills in life. The disability originates before the age of 18. And for a diagnosis of autism, well, for those who receive developmental disability administration services, they need to have a disability that originates before the age of 18. But most people with autism are diagnosed really within the first 5 years of life. Yes.
My question is, so if you have a person that is autistic, and let's say they in their young years, they talk a lot, or they're very good at reading and stuff, is it possible that they could lose that?
Absolutely. There is a percentage of people with autism that will lose all of their ability to verbalize. And it's a phenomenon that occurs with many children, including children that I know that are deaf who have autism, that had multiple signs that they were able to use. And after, probably after the 3rd or 4th birthday, they lost all their ability to communicate. And so there's still a lot of research around that. Why? Why? Because it was there. Where is it? I mean, I have friends who were, their sons are adults now, that when they were younger, talked all the time, that have absolutely no ability to verbalize their wants or needs. Again, the why. This is, it's it's just challenging. It's challenging to figure out why they happen. I remember my son having multiple words that he would use, and he could sing songs and do things that after actually him about the age of 2, he lost all of his ability to communicate verbally. He would point, he would take me to something. And then as time went on, actually, that usually the onset of puberty is difficult for any child, neurotypical. But then let's put the overlay of autism on top of it, and you have hormones going. It is a little even more challenging. And so that's when, at least for young men, challenging behaviors do tend to magnify if we don't give them opportunities to learn and understand what's going on in their bodies, what's going on in their head. Because we can't unzip it and look around and see what's going on. To help somebody even to understand what puberty is like. I mean, people will just say, "Oh, puberty." It's like, yeah, what? What does that mean? For instance, this was also happened to my son, but 35%, 30 to 35% of children with autism on the onset of puberty will start having seizures. Why? We don't know. But that's, again, one of the things that is just, we don't know.
Is it genetic? My father
Well, there are some genetic characteristics, but they haven't quite yet found out that specific genes. So there's clusters of genes, and there's clusters of genes depending on the type of even epilepsy, or is it epilepsy? Because every seizure doesn't mean they have epilepsy. So it's all,
Okay.
you looked at me kind of, I
Yeah,
know.
I didn't.
Yep, yes, no, just because you have seizures does not mean you have epilepsy. There's a different format of identifying whether there's a kid's epilepsy or not. And interesting enough, because as I had mentioned before, those who've been in my trainings before, my son, because he has an intractable seizure disorder, went through a genetic testing, and it was to find out the type of epilepsy he did have, because there are specific gene therapies that they can do to reduce or eliminate epileptic seizures. He did not have those, unfortunately, but we found out he had a completely different genetic mutation that right now he shares it with only about 1,100 people in the world. So it's on its very early stages of information.
So I have another question,
Yes.
sorry.
No worries.
So once you find out, let's say that your son, we'll say, has a seizure, is it best to get him like an animal that would help him, or he could have his buddy that would sense stuff like that, or he could?
You know, there is a lot of, there is a lot of research around that not only for seizures, but diabetes and one thing that therapy dogs are trained to identify some of these seizures. Like for my son, he has what is called partial complex seizure disorder. And the onset is quick, so they don't have a very long aura, because that's what animals look at, is the aura. That sometimes, just like a person with diabetes, their body excretes a smell. And for a person with autism, like for my son, you can tell by the difference in how he's breathing that he's going to have a seizure, or he might not, but there is some indications. So depending on the animal, and not every insurance, no insurances will pay for therapy dogs. It's usually that, or therapy animal, I should say. I can tell you the animals that I've had for my son growing up that we just had as a pet, all recognized when he was going to have a seizure, and they would run over and lick him in the face. And still now, I got him a companion dog. He's a golden doodle, and he's a big ding dong. His name is Scooby because he loves everything about Scooby-Doo. And when Michael is having a seizure, Scooby is right there. Scooby's always at his feet. It's like he has an innate understanding that something's different, and he's there to protect him. He wasn't trained on that. It's an instinctual thing. So, those are certain things that families have to identify. Is that something that they are interested in? I can also tell you that with having, like for instance, for my son to have a companion dog in a house that is rented, we had to get a doctor's diagnosis or letter that says he would benefit for companion dog. So that even though the rent lease application says no animals, they cannot discriminate against a person who needs a companion animal. But you have to go through that process. If the doctor doesn't feel you do need it, or the individual doesn't need it, then they won't write a letter. But in this case, even though Scooby is not, the best when it comes to identifying when Michael's going to have a seizure, he is very beneficial in helping reduce his anxiety, which is a trigger to his seizures. So that's a big bonus, a big plus. And it also helps him with that, bringing his, he has a really significant difficulties with socialization. And so to be social, he is the best icebreaker, because people look at the dog. Is this your dog? Yes. It's not like, oh, how are you? It's like, he will talk about his dog. Don't talk about me. Don't look at me. So in that regard, that's been a very positive thing. Sorry, I got off a little tangent there, but anyway, animals can be a great benefit. What I can also tell you, which is also another great benefit, is there is a, the name, it's like a Fitbit or like an Apple Watch, and actually Apple has a watch that also can monitor onset of seizures. And so my son has one that's called Empatica, and what it starts doing is reading the algorithm of when a person's going to have a seizure. And so what it will do is it alerts his care provider or me when he's going to have a drop seizure based on the algorithms prior to that we've been able to show that he's had a seizure. So that's been, technology has really provided a lot of safety within that realm. Which also, it's interesting that we talked about seizures, because some seizures also, a symptom of seizure is aggression. And sometimes people think, why are they becoming so aggressive? And it actually is a neurological response to a seizure. And especially if they have like a partial complex where they might have more of a psychomotor type of or epidemial seizure, that a person, it goes so fast and then they get disoriented and upset. And if people aren't watching, they will miss the fact that a person's actually having a seizure. So again, that's one of those ways where it's like, is this a person just reacting, or is it a neurological event? It's a way that we start just, shaving down more and more information to provide us with a hypothesis, because you really have to even look at the environment, people, expectations. It really comes down to does this person experience their autism, and that we can provide supports for this individual so they do not have to engage in negative behaviors to get their needs met. Most people diagnosed with autism show unevenness in their cognitive abilities, similar to what I just explained about having the EKG type of intellect patterns. A person who's on the autism spectrum can have co-occurring intellectual disabilities, will likely present differently, will learn differently, and require different and higher levels of individual support than an autistic child who does not have co-occurring intellectual disabilities will. So for instance, I've had, I've worked with some folks that they have autism because they have social communication difficulties, and they have patterns and behaviors that are distinct, but they don't have they don't engage in a lot of negative behaviors. It's interesting enough, or interesting to say, is most people that I have worked with typically have very challenging behaviors. And those are the ones that I really aspire to, because it's like they have something to say. And it's really exciting to find a different functional way for them to get their needs met versus a person who becomes very reclusive, who becomes very introverted. That's hard to pull somebody out versus somebody who is just on the rail of having behaviors, that impact their ability to learn and other people's ability to learn, that we can find functional ways for a person to get their needs met. And it's very rewarding and exciting to see. So many minimal verbal and nonverbal people with autism are diagnosed with comorbid diagnosis of intellectual disability. But some people could not speak, could read with fluency and comprehension. And that's what Temple Graham did. And actually a young lady I worked with some years ago, she, for most of her elementary years, sat on the floor, rocking back and forth, and she would take blocks or poker chips or whatever, so she could just pick them up and watch them drop to the floor. That was about the extent of her existence, until she had a paraeducator. Her name is Janet Millhouse. I still remember her, and that she started working with an augmentative communication device. And this has been now 25 years ago. So they were not as proficient as they are today. Let's just put it that way. And interestingly enough, they just by giving her the opportunity to keyboard, she started talking fluently on the keyboard, to the point where we were able to get her into general education classes, and she could instant message her teacher. But to still look at her, she might just be looking at this. This is all she would do, but then she would get up and type, and she would get back. She taught herself to read. She has written a book, and just her experience as of being a person with autism and being nonverbal. So we cannot identify a person's intellect just because they are nonverbal. We have to really figure out what a person's abilities are. And Nancy Brady, not Marcia's sister or anything, is that she says it can be difficult to tell how intellectually impaired a person is or isn't. She's a professor of speech and language at University of Kansas. She says, if you can't speak, then we may undershoot them when we assess them and assume that they are much more impaired than they actually are. And that is the seriously unfortunate scenario with many people that we support. If we don't give opportunities, people make really unjust assumptions. And like I said, then it really kind of spirals into if a person is misunderstood. Could you imagine if you were misunderstood? Let's say you were sent to Hong Kong, Japan, and you had no way to communicate, and you were sent to Hong Kong, Japan, and you were put into a special reading class. When you're in the United States, you were a proficient reader, and now you are in a special class, and you are treated with with education that is lower than your level of education. Would that frustrate you? Absolutely, because you're still a learner. Yes, you still have all of that information. It's just you went to a different country, a different language. It is then the need of the educational system, of the teacher, of the instructor to understand how does this person communicate, and then how can we then help that person learn, because how do I put this? Because I've worked in the educational system, and actually for several years I had in our area, our educational service district 112, which is in Southwest Washington, Clark County, Vancouver. I did for 11 years a regional autism consulting cadre, and I taught teachers best practice support strategies that could help students learn. I didn't teach curriculum. I taught support strategies for people to learn and helping teachers to learn that. So it was, it's been a very, like I said, for teachers to understand there is a process of learning, yes, but for also it is, as I'm actually just starting this whole process of designing universal design for learning, it's understanding that we can't just present one format of education and assume that everybody's going to be able to learn the same way. And there's a lot of neuroscience that is supporting that. So the hope is that we're going to see things differently, not only for people with autism, but for all students. So there's also analysis of mental health conditions that can co-occur with autism. And again, that could be something that is different and can also present much differently in a person with autism than a person who is neurotypical. So new studies established the prevalence by pulling data from studies and conducted separate statistical analysis that showed that those with autism can have a co-occurring mental health condition or neurodiverse such as attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD. I only have it down as a mental health condition because that is what the DSM-5 identifies it. Monica's not saying it because it is a neurodiverse, ADHD is also a neurodiverse diagnosis that we understand, and is not so much that of autism. We have anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, or a psychotic disorder, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, impulse control, conductive order, sleep-wake conditions. These are all co-occurring diagnosis with autism, and we have to really understand what one is versus how it is different from their autism, because we need to look at autism first as the driver to how we're going to support an individual and how we're going to meet their educational and communication needs so that they don't have to engage in negative behaviors to get their needs wanted, their wants and needs met. Well, and just what I said, if a comorbid diagnosis is present, it often cannot be treated in the same manner that it is for a person who is neurotypical. So a person with autism who has anxiety is going to be treated in a different format than a person who is neurotypical and who has anxiety. Autism has its own levels of needs and supports, and I'll get into that here in just a moment. Other comorbid conditions such as concurrent psychiatric conditions, neuroinflammation, and a variety of colon and digestive disorders, which afflict upwards of half of individuals with autism. Did you know that, not just autism, with everyone, that your brain, your gut, your intestines is considered your second brain? That is, when we have a lot of our individuals that have autism have gut conditions that interrupt nutrition, interrupt ability to absorb nutrients that actually interfere with learning. So think about if you have a person, and I'll get into that here in just a few minutes. Think about a person's, I'm just thinking about this one young, he wasn't young at the time, because he was 42, he had lived at Francis Haddon Morgan, he was working in a sheltered workshop, and they had him really kind of restricted from other people because he would become aggressive. And he would go into the bathroom and become very aggressive. And I'm watching this and thinking this is unusual even for all and anybody that I've worked with. And I said, have you taken him to a GI doctor? Have you? And it was like, well, yeah, he's got a torqued intestine, so that's why he's in pain. Have you treated it? No, we just know what it is. And so here he is, he's just been demonstrating that he's writhing in pain. He needs to have a bowel movement and he can't because his bowel is twisted and it's so painful. So he did have some surgery, had that condition remedied, which again is kind of one of those access to health services. Typically, when you have somebody who's nonverbal, typically don't get the care that they need because they're not good historians. They're not able to express what's going on with their needs. Yes.
You talk about the neuroinflammation. My son, I didn't know the autism and neuroinflammation go together.
They
So,
can.
and what does that look like? Does that look like chronic fatigue syndrome?
It can look like chronic fatigue. It could also be a chronic headache. It could be chronic sensitivity to light. It's like having.
I'm like freaking out over here.
Oh, am I describing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and neural inflammation, they have shown that when children are born, oftentimes children with autism have a larger head circumference when they're born than their peers, and that is, it does have, it's attributed to neuroinflammation. But neuroinflammation is something that can continue, and like I said, it does cause many many symptoms that, again, when you look at autism, and if you have somebody who's, let's say, who's nonverbal, or when I get into sensory processing, something that's called interception. Interception is our innate ability within our body to say, gosh, I have a headache. I need to do something for myself. A person with autism doesn't always recognize. They just know that something is different. And sometimes they will express themselves in problematic behaviors. Like, for instance, running out of a room because they don't want to be around the lights because they're so painful.
Also like a head banging their head against the wall or something, because
Yep.
they might feel the pain, just think there's something on their head.
That's it. And it becomes, I mean, especially people who engage in self-injurious behaviors, it doesn't mean that they were trying to get rid of something oftentimes. It doesn't mean that they have the good solution. They are just trying to do an action that will stop whatever is happening. And interception, like I said, is one of those areas that we recognize as, if, you wake up in the morning and say, gosh, I don't feel really well. And so, well, where do you feel? Are you sick? Do you have a headache? And you are able to kind of pinpoint where that is. That person with autism isn't always able to pinpoint it. Oftentimes cannot pinpoint it. It's called the eighth sense. And I'll get into that here again in just a few minutes. It's when I was looking at that, when I first started learning about interception, because one of the things that I always noticed, like for my son who does have GI problems, I would know that he would need to use the bathroom. He would keep them and said, Michael, we need to use the restroom. And then he would go use it. And then you could see his anxiety would go down. He would not recognize he needed to use the restroom. And he would just be in pain. Have you ever had to go to the bathroom so bad? You're just like, and it's like, can you think of anything else other than I need to get to that bathroom ASAP? We need to think about that. And like I said, I'll get more in depth later on. And by the way, we will take a break for 10 minutes at 2:30, and then we will start again. So the other psychological or physiological comorbid diagnoses, like having a bowel disease, having epilepsy or seizures, the genetic conditions like Fragile X or SYNGAP1, neuroinflammation and other autoimmune disorders, sensory problems, tuberous sclerosis are all things that we need to consider. When you think of tuberous sclerosis, if you're familiar or not familiar with the term, it basically are tumors that grow inside a person's body. They're benign, but they can grow anywhere. So there is a percentage of people with autism that have tuberous sclerosis, meaning all of a sudden they have a tumor that's growing, let's say, on their kidney. No reason why. And then all of a sudden the individual, the child or the adult is upset every time they have to urinate because it's painful. And it's just through elimination of symptoms that people start to discover, oh, that this person has tuberous sclerosis, that we need to look at other areas and we might do a PET scan to identify, to see if other tumors have grown within the person's body, including their brain. Generally, before medications are introduced, non-pharmacological interventions should be considered, initialized and evaluated for efficacy. That is out of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Kansas Medical Center. University of Kansas has been one of the prevalent universities focusing on autism in the United States. So you will see that I have cited them many times because it's interesting. I'll hear from parents who'll say that the teacher has asked that maybe we look at medications that help us this, be able to pay more attention or focus. When it's like, we cannot eliminate a behavior without understanding what the behavior is about. So it's, and what we need to do, and what research is saying is we have to really change the way we instruct versus medicate to reduce. Because medications, as we know, out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, the Teach Center, and as the University of Kansas has said, is that generally before medications are introduced, non-pharmacological interventions, teaching strategies, supports, and those types need to be initialized and evaluated for efficacy before we ever consider medication. And oftentimes, because we are in a Western medicine culture, it's like, isn't there a medication for this? How do I stop this? When a doctor might say, well, your anxiety, really, I can't give you anything, but if you go and exercise, people like, oh, well, I really want to have a medication. That seems a little more easy. We have to change. We have to change our own behaviors. And oftentimes that is something that we need to do. Actually, I have a teacher, a very good friend of mine. One of the things that some of her students, before they even came in the classroom, because they couldn't settle down, they couldn't engage in instruction, that she would make sure they had the opportunity to go play on the playground. You have to play. You have to get your proprioceptive needs met. You have to get your energy used up so when you come in, you're able to learn. And people would often think, well, you're just giving them privilege. They should be able to do their studies and then they get to go out and play. It's like, no, in this case, they need to play before they can ever learn. And it really is about changing mindsets. I know when recess is taken away, it's like, oh my gosh. It is a very unfortunate scenario
Did you
because,
say recess was taken?
Yeah, they punish bad behaviors by taking recess away, but they needed just more
They need more
recess.
recess.
yeah, exactly.
I have a question.
Yes,
I'm just, of course, learning about autism, and I don't ever hear anybody talk much about diet. The food,
Yeah.
like casein, milk, made my
Yes.
grandson crazy. He's on a non-dairy diet, totally different person.
yes,
Why don't they talk about that? Like, there's so many people I see that like, I give them everything, sugar, milk, and I'm like, why? I mean,
And
it's an anti-inflammatory, like the
It
neuro,
is.
an anti-inflammatory diet is the best thing for an autistic kid.
You're,
They don't
yes.
talk about it though.
And exactly, and it's called CAM, which is a complementary alternative medicine to Western medicine. And it is something that families have to source out because, for my son in particular, he is on what is called a FODMAP diet. And that it does reduce, he doesn't eat anything with a lot of acidic qualities, so no tomatoes, no onions. Though he can have dairy, we reduce or limit his gluten intake, but each person's going to be different. I mean, and it's the trial and error, part of it. And for my son, we've gone through where we live, the Oregon Health Science University in their nutrition program that specializes in, for instance, ketogenic diets for epilepsy. And it also helps with neuroinflammation. And what happened when he went on it, we were able to reduce his some of his seizures, but it triggered gastrointestinal problems for him and his ability to, he couldn't take all the dairy, just like what you were saying. So it's like, it is a process. It's a process. That's
Not only that, it's hard because you have to, I've had to educate, we're Mexicans, we eat a lot of Mexican food.
Sure.
So for me to suddenly start, and it's all for my great grandson,
sure.
but for me to suddenly start having to do special food that I've never learned how to do.
Yeah.
It requires commitment, dedication,
From everyone,
And it's expensive.
and
and it can be expensive, yes.
but when you, I mean, if it works, I mean, you will figure out a way to get,
Yeah, it's
that met.
about him, not about us, so, and that's,
A lot of times is getting them to eat that diet too.
Yes.
My guy loves all the health food.
Yeah.
I love it.
Mine does not.
Yeah.
There went
Sugar
years
and
and he ate bagel bites and pizza rolls.
Right, I was gonna say, or
And
chicken
noodles.
nuggets is the other.
Yeah,
Oh, I
and,
make chicken nuggets.
and it's not like you can't put that in front of them like, oh, they'll eat it or they'll starve. They will starve.
Yeah,
And
Here's
then throw
a-
fits and then they're hungry and then they won't sleep. So it's not always that people just don't want to put in the time and effort. It's
Yeah.
just a really big process. Like my
Yeah.
son's 16 now and his diet's changed dramatically, but it has been very, very slow.
well, he's not even 2 yet, so it's easy to get him into
So-
this.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
since he
Yeah.
was born, I started basically doing it. Like
2 years
after-
old, you'll probably have a lot of luck with it, because there's like one kid up at the center I work at, his diet is pretty much just vitamin enriched milk and applesauce, because he will not eat anything else. He'll spit it out, he will pretty much starve himself.
Yeah,
My son, well, even to this day, but still his favorite food is it's oatmeal and key lime yogurt.
The school, in the chat, someone said the CPS, was called because he wouldn't eat.
Family said CPS.
Oh, he told them that we don't feed him. He told the school that.
Oh my goodness. And there you have somebody who's a literal concrete thinker,
Right.
that they aren't feeding him what he wants. So there was that little bit of detail that was missing there, but yes,
Right.
yes.
That's really something.
I mean, that's, again, one of those scenarios where, like, for instance, a situation where a child just would throw himself on the ground, did not want to go, get on the bus to go home. Just would be so upset. They get him on the bus and they finally get him home. But this happened every day. So CPS was called because it was like, this child does not want to go home. Why? Well, what it turned out to be is he did not like the transition. He didn't know where he was going.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter that it's a bus and it's the same place. Where am I going? He didn't have the executive function to say, I get on the bus at this time, go home, and I see mom. When they put a schedule in place that school is over, get on the bus, you go home, and then mom and dad were involved in it, and this is the activity that you can do when you get home. So that structure and predictability was what was necessary for him, but people immediately thought there is a huge issue here. And unfortunately, it wasn't, it was the fact that there wasn't the structure and predictability that he needed. And he didn't have a functional way to express himself. So that's, like I said, that always becomes a very challenging situation. So when we know when communication needs are met and behaviors persist, that functional behavior analysis really needs to be engaged so that we can, really identify and do some definitions of aggressive assault or sometimes self-injurious behavior. Is it pain, like the gastrointestinal issues, like my gentleman that I worked with? Or is it a mental health concern, like bipolar or obsessive compulsivity? Functional behavior analysis are performed by a psychologist or board certified behavior analyst who will help with the development of a positive behavior support plan. And positive behavior support plans, and I will get into what my son's looks like, and that it has consistently stayed the same for almost 20 years, with the exception of new technology that we did as a team. But at any rate, what we look at is where are the challenging behaviors. We look at the disability, the environment, mental conditions, and life events. It's interesting that we have, there are a lot of families that are in situations where mom and dad are not in the house, that we have blended families, or we have single moms. When you look at life events, that in itself can just have a huge impact on that child. And then you look at autism, you look at the environment, and now we have, say, 2 different environments, 3 different environments. I mean, that's what, with my son, we went through that. We hit my house, his dad's house. It can be very challenging. And then when you have a medical need on top of it and you don't know what it is, and this can all create challenging behaviors. And so we look at the characteristics of autism, how we identify it, and what's are defined. We look at these characteristics that I'm going to be going through in depth, a little more in depth, like cognitive differences, different learning styles, sensory processing difficulties, difficulty with social relationships, need for sameness, and communication difficulties. We know that for cognitive people, that most people with autism focus on the detail and are unable to see the whole or how things fit together. Can I mention your great-grandson? when he was
Yes,
at the airport?
absolutely.
And that's for what was your name?
Gloria.
Gloria. So Gloria came in today. Her daughter, they went to Texas here a few weeks ago, or last week, I can't remember. At any rate, they're all excited and to be able to show their grandson, great-grandson, the airplanes at the airport. Well, behind the counter where they typically have a flight attendant or a ticket, whatever a person is, that they had a vacuum. And he zeroed in on that vacuum, and nothing else mattered in that whole place other than his interest, his, that other part of, restrictive repertoire behaviors. He focused on that vacuum. He could have probably cared less about any airplane that was coming or going. Am I right?
Vacuum.
It was vacuum, yeah. So that again, he was focused on the detail and not the fact that, holy cow, we're on a journey. We're gonna go on a plane, look at all the planes coming and going. It's like, yeah, no, it's all about the vacuum.
These things the size of buildings flying through there. Nope, there's that.
Yeah, right, exactly. They have difficulty extracting information or integrating information, extracting meaning and distinguishing among relevant details. I always find that as I'm sitting here just spewing information, I stop and think about that is there are people that, and sometimes I'm that same way. If let's say there was kind of a screech to the microphone and I just kept talking, do you think you'd be able to really pick up on what I was saying? No, because we have, our environment is being intruded, is being bombarded with something else. So our ability to extract information and gather relevant details is compromised. And so when we have people who have sensory processing difficulties or difficulty in organizing their thoughts or even organize what is being said, it is difficult for them to pick up information, especially when it's verbal. That's what, we are all taught to talk to a person, to give them that information, to give them directions. That's how most of us learned. That we know that children with autism and adults with autism, their eyes work better than their ears. So to be able to distinguish from relevant and irrelevant information, we need to put what we have the expectations of that child in visual format, typically in pictures or pictures and words, because it's going to help that person decipher what's important and what's not important. So I'll take Gloria, you going on to the airport, going through TSA. And I know your daughter is the one that's a little more proficient at figuring on all the details of your flight. But how many times did you or your daughter look at your ticket to know what gate you needed to go to?
I don't look, I always leave it to her.
All right, how many times did you look?
Every time she asked me,
Right.
she had me look probably.
4 or 5 times.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, because that's when we get into a fight, flight, or freeze, our ability to recall information is very limited because we are in our instinctual safety. We need our bodies in safety mode. I need to either fight, flight, or freeze. So our ability to recall information has now gone to our extremities. Our extremities, all of our blood has gone to our fingers and our toes and our legs and our muscles, and we're ready to either go or fight or just stand there and freeze.
She wants to flee me, so that's her thing.
I don't like airports, airplanes, so it was all, and then she's like, when are we in? Where's my gate? Where's my gate? And the babies, "Wah."
Right.
I'm like.
Right.
but I did
So,
it.
exactly. So it's, now think about that, and that's in a situation where at least you have the coping mechanisms to be able to look at, or be able to say, you know what, as soon as we're gonna get where we're going, things are gonna be all right, or I'm gonna just set myself for this, however many days we're gonna be there, I know that I'm going to be in this kind of juggling, circus, three-ring circus thing, but this will come to an end. And for our folks with autism, they don't know that. And it's just this constant juggling and circus that's going on in their head and around them. And they cannot distinguish from what is relevant and what's not relevant. And that's one of the reasons why your grandson and great-grandson are running for the vacuum, because that gives him grounding. That helps him. Is there anything that we have anything in your life that you like to do when you become stressed or overwhelmed?
I like to cook.
You like to cook, I'm that way too.
That's where I release, I like my little privacy. I cook for a lot of people, and my daughter always complained about it because I'm always cooking for everyone. But that's my relaxation. That's where I get lost. That's my world. My
Yeah.
little world is right there in that kitchen.
So he's just
Exactly.
the vacuum. Because I'm like, I love you, I love vacuum.
Yeah.
When he comes to my house, I go, hi, he goes, hi, vacuum. That's all, this is vacuum.
Yeah. Exactly. It used to be for years, I would draw a picture of my son with a vacuum. I mean, that was what he wanted, vacuum, draw that. He knows how to draw vacuums now, but that's really not what he perseverates on. I'll get into what he does here in a few minutes as well. But at any rate, you can see that we have things that we just love to do. And mine is cooking as well. Actually, I think you commented on my Instagram, but
Oh, yeah.
my sisters and I, we made almost 120 jars of jam and jelly this weekend. And it's just, I love to do that. And I mean, it's for my sisters, but it's for my son and for my daughter and my grandkids. It's just like, that's what I love to do. And we did,
But you had help.
yes. Oh, yes, I did. I had my sisters. I'm not gonna do that
That
alone.
sounds, that sounds like fun.
It was fun. It is fun. And
It
my husband
can be, I did 500 tamales one time.
Oh,
Oh, my
By
gosh.
myself.
I know that I make them
helps. Oh, I did, almost 100 jars of marinara.
There you go.
And 125 pounds of tuna. But it's
Oh.
something I really, it's,
You get
It's when you
lost
get-
in there, don't you?
it is, and it's like, my family comes together and we do something, and it is productive and it's fun and, so that's what we do. Some people like to read, some people like to go for a walk, other people like to draw, paint, whatever. We get to a place where we can do something that helps us relax.
Is that the same with autistics? They not all focus on a vacuum. Some will do other stuff too.
That is, yes, and that's why they like structure and predictability. Because if you get out of the norm, then it just rattles, it rattles their world. Structure and predictability is really beneficial for all of us. We like structure and predictability, even when people say, no, I don't like structure and predictability. The fact that you don't like structure and predictability is structure and predictability. We like things in a certain way, in a certain format. And when that goes out of alignment for some folks, it just makes their world fall apart. And again, people say, well, why are they falling apart? What we have to say, what are they trying to communicate? And for that young boy that, just threw himself on the ground, didn't want to get on the bus, he needed structure and predictability. The predictability is, where's this bus going to go? And one of the reasons why he was really an added level to this is the bus was a para educator bus. special education bus, and it didn't always go to the same route on the way home. So you may have one student that's there, another student that's not, so it would go a different route every single time. So this child was just like losing his mind because he had no idea, am I ever gonna go home? Am I gonna go to this house? I mean, can you imagine? And you think about the other sensory levels of that, if you've ever gone on some of these like paratransit buses that have diesel engines, and the smell of diesel in the inside the actual cab and the rattle of what a diesel
That
engine
can give you
does.
a headache too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? It's like, oh, I get to go on a bus that gives me a headache and makes me sick.
Yeah.
No. So, like I said, all behaviors communication is really figuring out what it is. And so we know that, as I've been talking about, the sensory processing, difficulty modulating different stimulation, whether it's an environment, whether it's touch, clothing, for touch could be sensitive to soft, a soft touch, like a soft touch could be very alerting to the point of that it's painful versus somebody who needs maybe a pat, and that could be more relaxing. Auditory input, loud sounds may be painful to a person's ears. They could scream, screaming could indicate they're trying to block out other noises. Those are some ideas with auditory input, or that they want to put their headphones on. Actually, I was in Starbucks yesterday, and it was a little girl, she had been probably 3 or 4, and she's with her grandmother, and the noises in Starbucks, you've got the grinders, you've got the whirling of whatever, and she's just sitting there doing this. And grandmother's just like, let's see. I'm like, get that little girl some headphones or go to the drive up. I mean, that's my thought, but she was just very patient, had her hands over her ears. But it was just something that she just had difficulty in trying to modulate. Oral sensitivities, we had talked about, food sensitivities. There are sometimes food textures, hot and cold sensitivities. Another person that I know that his day would not be complete if he could not have at least a cup of pickled jalapenos. That's it. That was something that was his snack. He would go through literally one of those gallon jars that you get at Costco in a week. That was something he needed, that was something that was his comfort food.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you recommend, or is it a good idea that if you know your child when they're of age and can do it, handle headphones and
Yes.
just wear them?
Yes.
When you're gonna go to a market or someplace that's loud, just take the headphones or something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our center that wear headphones all the time, and it doesn't affect her badly in any way because they'll get used to it. They'll get used to the muffling of the noises.
Well, I
and be able to
put my
differentiate.
headphones on my great grandson and he'll take them off, but then he'll put them on and then he'll take them off.
Because he's heard us put music through ours, and so he's probably trying to figure out, I don't hear the sound.
And the other part to that is we need to make sure they fit right.
Yeah, these are grown up
Adult size.
phones.
Yeah, so they can be sometimes, well, obviously they're too big for the ear canal if it's an earbud or something on the outside of the ear that really doesn't fit in the. So, I would probably try the ones that.
So is it best to keep him quiet so he doesn't hear anything, or soft music or whatever?
It depends on the person. It really does. And actually, if you had a speech and language or even an occupational therapist that could help you with that. Because occupational therapists, although, you're like, it's auditory, why would not speech and language pathologists help with that? Occupational therapists have a really better handle on sensory input and sensory responses. So there's a lot of it varies in so many ways. For my son, he likes to block all sounds out. That being said,
So he wears earphones all the time?
no, only when we're out in
Oh.
public. He wants to wear his headphones. And then sometimes if we're at the doctor's office, I will do Bluetooth, so he has his favorite, YouTube video, so the doctor and I can talk. Because he's like, blah, 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 it's time for me to go.
Yeah.
What am I here for?
Okay.
So,
There's somebody who hates music.
That hates music.
Yeah, so just every single person is different.
Yeah, our grandson grew up with Latin music.
Yeah, if you put on his music, he'd be happy.
He's like, he likes the Latin music.
I
But
mean,
that
when you
changed
can,
when she became a teenager. She became a teenager and she stopped liking music.
oh, interesting. But that's fabulous. I mean, when you find something, it's just like, oh, thank the Lord, that there's a key here that we can work on. Because what eventually what you can do, and that could be a goal that, you start considering as the child ages, is that ability to connect a sensory issue with something they can do for themselves. Right now, it's gonna be, you recognize it and you help him, you give him a choice, do you want to hear it or not? And then they can put it on. But as they get older, you can start helping them understand their sensory processing and how they self-modulate, rather than I have to go into some sort of behavior to get my needs met. We teach them independence and autonomy over accessing their own sensory processing or sensory eliminating tools. And that, it's interesting because there was, I would have, especially with some general ed teachers, a little pushback when students would want to wear their headphones. It's like, well, they need to be hearing the instructions. Like, well, they are hearing the instruction. It's just the sound of the fan, the sound of everything else, that it doesn't eliminate all noises. It just muffles a lot of the compromising auditory input that, like I said, if we had a screechy mic, you would not be able to really concentrate on what I'm saying. But if you had something that would eliminate, the most of it, my voice would then resonate more than the screeching microphone.
You know what's interesting? My husband, he believes or he thinks that he could have possibly or is possibly somewhat autistic based on some of the things that he's been hearing. He's very sensitive to noise.
Yeah.
He doesn't like certain lights. And when I first married him, I just thought, man, what did I marry? He's sensitive to everything. But the more I'm learning about autism, he could be right, if
And you could also
possible.
have a sensory processing disorder. Doesn't mean you have autism.
Yeah.
It could be that you just, because I'm that way, there are auditory things that, I really, for me to learn, to be able to learn and comprehend, I need quiet, I need solitude. My husband, on the other hand, he's got the TV on, the radio and everything, he's, matter of fact, he loves it. Matter of fact, when he goes to bed at night, he needs to have the TV on.
Oh.
And I need to have it black and no sound. But it's just, something that each of us, we have preferences. And so, but like you said, there is a number of things. It could be it could be a sensory processing disorder, which is a neurodiverse process of trying to figure out what it is. The positive thing with, like, for your husband is that he figured out self-coping mechanisms. That either it's like, oh, I need to get away from this, I need to put headphones on, I need to do whatever, that a person can help themselves. For the person with autism, because they have their critical thinking, their executive function, they just get into a fight or flight, flight or freeze, and they cannot help themselves. So that's going to be one of those things. So knowing how a person is able to or not process sensory input is also going to be helpful to us to figure out why a person's engaging in a behavior, because we haven't identified what their sensory processing abilities or inabilities are. So like I said, the oral stimulation, olfactory, smell sensitivities. If you've got, oftentimes now you can go into doctor's offices or different office buildings that say this is a scent-free zone, because people really are very sensitive to smells. and unfortunate because I am one of those, when you go into an elevator, it's just like, you know who's been there before, because it's either been the aftershave or the perfume. It's just like, oh my gosh, it will make me nauseous. That's just, and I didn't realize how sensory, especially olfactory sensitive I was until I was pregnant with my daughter, my first child. It was like anything cooking, anything that I could smell just would make me throw up.
Shampoo in the shower.
Everything.
Yes,
threw up.
yes, exactly.
My husband had to cook outside, he hated his life. I'm like, don't even bring food in his house.
Right,
The launch
exactly,
of Iowa shopping.
right? Yeah.
Headache.
Oh, that's my favorite. I love going through that.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny how we all are?
Yes. And then there's what's referred to as proprioceptive input, is that need for movement and joint compression. Like my friend who always let the kids go out and play before they would come in to do their schoolwork. I mean, where we have people who restrict going out to playgrounds because they didn't finish their assignment. It's like, oh, I mean, it's just terrible because oftentimes it is that need for proprioceptive input, that need for movement. It's similar to when doctors will often prescribe for people with depression and anxiety. You need to go for a walk. You need to get some exercise. Why? Because you get joint compressions. When you have joint compressions and movement, your body actually excretes natural enzymes, your own chemicals, the dopamines, the epinephrines that help you relax. There's a reason for this. Proprioceptive input is for some people very, very important. Vestibular input, when you have people who have that need for swinging, spinning, that's where they get a lot of joy. I mean, when I've had people who, can flap, who spin, who swing, who can actually spin to the point where you're kind of getting dizzy watching them, and they're not. These are all sensory processing difficulties that help them regulate their body. And when you have somebody who, for instance, you might see somebody who's spinning, the thing that I would say is, if they're not hurting themselves, they should be allowed to spin. They should be allowed to spin, because we all do it in one way or another. We do it in what is referred to as a socially appropriate way. We're not gonna spin, but we're gonna find ways to get our vestibular, our proprioceptive, our olfactory, oral, auditory, touch needs met in one way or another.
What about when they want you to hold them and spin?
Then you find something that will spin
No,
them.
I'm just spinning, I'm like, I can't do it no more, and then
Yes.
he has a problem with transition, so that's like, wow. I'm like, I need to say.
Do you have an office chair?
Huh?
An office chair?
Yeah, we do have, he likes that too, but he likes loving to hold it and spin.
Because he wants the
He
pressure.
wants a deep pressure, which is a
Yeah.
proprioceptive. Have
Yeah.
you tried pressure, deep pressure vests or anything? like that?
He has that, well, I just figured out, because he has sleep problems,
Oh,
I got a weighted blanket for me. And when I try to have him sleep with me, flails all over, I put a weighted blanket, something like
Oh,
that. Never even moved. I'm
Yep.
like, it's been all my life. I Google it. Yep, very known for autistic children
that's
and
that
adults
proprioceptive.
that have that pressure. I didn't
Deep
know
pressure.
that.
Yeah, the joint compression. Matter of fact, there's also it's called Wilbarger's brushing protocol, which is a process of brushing and joint compressions that also help reduce kids and adults a lot of their anxiety. So it is 2:30. Let's take a 10-minute break, just so that I can drink and go to the restroom. And we'll return back here at 2:42.
If you stop the recording and then restart the recording, will it be one at the end? That I can post online?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nope, it's not gonna let me do that.
Because when the kids are touching, I was telling them.
What I'm gonna do is just put on, stop the videos and for me.
Not everybody.
Oh, can actually.
Does it, so yeah.
But yeah,
All right, we're gonna get
so-
started again.
Well, yeah. just
Hopefully
some
Gloria will
reason
come back.
use that, So we just make it more from wellness and more.
So there is a question.
Go to device, we can do more complicated things.
So the question is David, is that the one that you were talking about?
Yeah, her name is Michelle, actually.
Oh, all right. Question, my daughter's school is trying to understand disruptive and or attention-seeking behavior that seem solely within her control. How to distinguish sensory behaviors, i.e. my daughter is licking her skin in classroom. Her classmates and teacher draw attention to it by saying, ew, gross, stop. Oops, didn't mean to send it yet. And it says, this causes an escalation of behavior on her part. Teacher thinks she is seeking attention. I think it's more complicated, but struggling to problem solve. I think you're right, Michelle, is that if a person is licking their skin, you have to ask, what is the intention of licking their skin? And the hypothesis that they feel is one, that she has total control over her, over this behavior. I would say, how is that possible? How would you know that she has total control over that? I would ask for someone to do a functional behavior assessment to understand what is the function behind the licking of the skin. In what situation is this happening? In what environment is this happening? In what level of instruction is this happening? Just being able to say something randomly, like I think, she really seems to have, it's fully within her control. We need to see data. What is it about that? And what is it that she's getting out of looking? And that if everybody's looking at her and saying, ew, yes, that would be something that would, it's embarrassing, it's shaming. And I don't think that is the best way of trying to solve a problem or to help her understand what she can do instead. Like I said, I would certainly, I would ask somebody else to do some sort of assessment and not just what the teacher thinks it might be. So anyway, oh, thank you, Malia. That's, she put it. Functional behavior assessment provided by school district, yes. They are provided by the school district, and it is part of what the school psychologist will do. I would also suggest having an occupational therapist provide their input on that as well, because school psychologist is looking mostly at the cognitive and learning skills. So, I can tell you, I had two young women that I worked with, that the thing that they loved to do the most was smell. They had olfactory, they wanted to smell people, smell things. They would put their nose really in somebody's chest. In kindergarten, that's kind of sometimes cute. When they're an adult, that's not so cute. Matter of fact, could be, reason to call the police. But to giving her an alternative way of getting her smells in. We did that for both individuals, that they had little cotton balls, literally, with essential oils on it, that they even wear essential oil medallion so that they can have that smell. That's, which is funny because aromatherapy is such this big nuance, kind of thing. It's like, oh heck, that's been around for so long. And then when you think about people with autism or anybody with a sensory processing dysfunction, if things are olfactory, we are all smell sensitive. That's why we gravitate towards perfumes we like, or soaps that we like, or hand soap, or a hand lotion. There's this huge diverse range of things because we know that just one size doesn't fit all. And for her licking her skin, it could be the same as somebody chewing on their cuticles. If she were chewing on her cuticle, no one would say, ew, gross. She's licking her skin. What is the intention behind that is what needs to be discovered. So here's the interception part that I was talking about, is the inability to communicate the feelings of illness or pain verbally to their care provider. And that the multiple factors include illness may manifest as aggressive or self-injurious behavior, especially if the person is pressured to continue with a daily routine, work activity, or school activity. The common underlying causes of new onset of behavior problems include infections or side effects from medications. Side effects from medications are huge, especially when you have somebody who has a neurodiverse central nervous system. Putting on or adding medications can really exacerbate side effects of medications. The other thing to that as well is, like for my son and many other people, they have what is referred to as a paradoxical effect, meaning the opposite effect of what the intended purpose of medication was for. Like when we first trying to help get his teeth cleaned through a dentist, they said, well, we'll give you a prescription of Valium. All right, so we tried the Valium. He was up for 36 hours straight. It does not do anything for him.
The Benadryl, my son.
Oh, benefit.
Up,
Yep, completely,
up all night.
the complete opposite. So the other things that, you know, are influenza, ear infection, dental problems, migraine, and pain of any kind are a few of the common causes of reemergence of problems. And that they're not able to communicate their feelings of pain or illness, that can be very problematic. They don't know what's wrong. They want it to stop. And like you had mentioned before, I mean, you might have somebody who engages in self-injurious behaviors by banging their head or hitting their head, because they just want it to stop, and they are, you know, really reaching for anything that's gonna help. So that's that 8th sense that I was referring to. For example, some of the other things is that a person feels thirsty, we get a drink. If we feel full, we stop eating. If we feel cold, we'll get a sweater. If we feel the need to urinate, we go to the bathroom. If we feel anxious, we seek comfort. If we feel frustrated, we seek help. If we feel that our internal balance is off, we are motivated to act to seek immediate relief from the discomfort or what's really has been caused by the imbalance of what's going on in the body. When the interoception system is properly working, this sensation alerts us that our internal balance is off and motivates us to act, to do something that will restore our balance. Like, oh, if I go to the bathroom, I'm going to relieve the pressure on my bladder and I'll be able to think. For the person with autism, it's just like, they might start pacing, they might start, you know, engaging in, you know, self-injurious behaviors or disrupting other people. And it's just because they need to use the restroom and they're not able to say, oh, by the way, I need to do that. And like I said, I mean, this all just circles back to that all behaviors communication is trying for us to figure out what it is, why this person needs to engage in something. And it's not an easy answer. I mean, just what Michelle was talking about, that the teacher feels that her licking her skin is fully intentional, that she's doing it for seeking behavior. It's like, as I'm telling you all these different symptomatic issues, that's where I would stop and say, whoa, wait a minute. How did you come about this hypothesis? And there is a process, and I will explain to it, which is called the competing behavior diagram. And as we get towards the end of it, I will show you what that looks like and how it helps us kind of define what are some of the, what's the setting event, what's the trigger, what is something that, what's the actual outcome we like to do, what's the alternative outcome that we can do to help this person, but most importantly, what's maintaining a person's behavior. And typically a person's behavior, if it continues to do the same thing over and over and over again, even though they have been reprimanded, they have been shamed, and they're still doing it, what is maintaining that behavior? That's what we have, that's where the question comes in. And I can, when especially with people that I've worked with, it's just like, I've told them to do it over and over and over again, and they still aren't doing it. It's like, well, how's that working for you? We need to change. We need to figure out what it is that's going to be successful for this person. Then we have difficulty with social relationships. This is another one of the characteristics of autism is oftentimes people with autism. That is really the first pillar of the diet impairment is social communication difficulties, which is struggle with complexities and nuances of social interaction. Making friends, sometimes they don't know how. And that being said, it is a skill that can be taught. It just means I don't know how to make friends. Or their friendship looks different than, say, you or I might have a friend. Difficulty initiating conversations and volunteering information, especially open-ended questions. So how was your day today? Rotten, or not bad, or I hated the bus ride home. It's when to initiate conversation for our kids with autism, we typically want to give them the ability to volunteer information based on a choice. How was your day? What was the best part of your day? Was it PE? Was it reading? Was it math? Which was your best part? So you're giving them more of a structured question with choices. But again, all of this is a skill that can be taught. And then understanding someone else's perspective, theory of mind or mind blindness. The perspective from somebody else's point of view is something that a person often with autism has difficulty with. That when you say something to me, like for instance, I'm trying to think, a perspective from somebody else's point of view could be when you, like for instance, I do a social story when Michael gets upset with me. He hits me, and instead of saying, "Don't hit me, that hurts," I'm going to give him, "Why does this hurt, Mom?" And it goes through a social autopsy of understanding. There's a reason for this. I know you're reacting, but I would prefer that you ask me in a different way or tell me to stop because this hurts my arm and I don't, and it makes me sad when you hurt me. So him understanding my perspective is not something that a person always understands from who has autism. What is your perspective? Like we look at, trying to think of something that's not, like, say, just if I just thought everybody in this room was, that we were all on one political side of the whole continuum of political, liberal or conservative. I just thought we were all one thing. Would it be that I understand the perspective from somebody else's point of view? If I think we're all, let's just say, we're all liberals, we're all on the same page, right? And some people say, well, no, actually, I might be more inclined to think of this way. That's a perspective. And that takes time and effort to help a person understand, because it's only through helping them understand that other people have different mindsets. It's something that takes time. And there are ways to be able to help explain that. And social stories are one of those ways of doing it. And just helping a person understand that I have a different thought that you might not. We know that sometimes children with autism relate better to adults than they do typically their peers, because adults tend to be more predictable than their peers. It's not that people with autism don't relate, they may relate in a different way. For instance, for my son to make friends, his mindset or his perspective of making friends is that he's in the same room as somebody and they both are drawing, but they're in the room together. That is a friend. Is that a friend to me? No, but he relates differently than I do. It's not that people with autism don't know, don't want to make friends. Sometimes they don't know how. Because to make friends, it takes communication, obviously. Like, let's just say, for instance, going to the airport. You know, let's say all of a sudden it says, you know, flight 402 to Seattle is going to be delayed for an hour. And then you see people start talking to each other, complete strangers, like, oh, I'm gonna miss my flight, I'm gonna miss my connection, I'm gonna blah, blah, blah. People start talking and communicating. And because you're all in the same, you're basically all in the same boat, you're all gonna be delayed, you're gonna be late for meetings. That is a commonality that we all start talking about. That isn't always what happens for a person with autism. Again, not understanding the perspective from somebody else's point of view. My friend, I think I might have mentioned a couple weeks ago in their training, that he knows everything about commercial adhesives. Did I tell you the story? I've told it to somebody. Oh, that anything he, you know, if it's concrete to glass or glass to wood or wood to concrete, he knows the exact adhesives that will work on that. And that's all he wants to talk about. And you know, that you have had an application that you've used yourself. It's like, anyway, you know, he just kind of keeps talking and you're like, so his perspective is I can talk and you're listening. So his perspective of friendship is that you're going to listen to me. But my perspective of friendship is that there's reciprocity, that each of us are going to take turns and listen and hear and talk and communicate and share stories. So that can be really difficult for some folks. Knowing and developing a relationship with a person with autism, though, is imperative. It can be done through joint attention activities. I'm thinking of your grandson. I mean, an activity that I would probably do if I met with your grandson would be, I'm gonna drag out a vacuum cleaner. You know, that interests him. I'm not gonna bring over, you know, I'm gonna have a puzzle. Let's do a puzzle together. It's like, yeah, you bring out a vacuum and then we can talk. We're gonna go into that person, into what their likes and interests are, and then we build from that point. I mean, I can think of just, I mean, I had one young lady that she loved everything that had to do with Betty Boop. If you're familiar with Betty Boop, she wanted to look like Betty Boop. She wanted her fingernails painted like Betty Boop. She wanted a purse like Betty Boop. She wanted everything like Betty Boop. And so I did all of her support strategies, visuals and 5-point scales and everything as Betty Boop, because that interests her. You know, she could use a calculator. And it was like, if you had $20, you know, kind of the math story, and Betty Boop wanted to buy a magazine, fingernail polish, and a purse, how would she go about doing that? And she would like, you know, she could do a budget if that was interesting to her. But if I would say, all right, you have some money and you're gonna go to the store and you're gonna buy X, Y, and Z, be like, you know, it wouldn't even interest her at all. So knowing what's important to a person. Another was a gentleman a young man, and he was a teenager when I started working with him. He loved Class A motorhomes. When you think of vacuum cleaners, this is a motorhome. That was the thing that he looked for. His family was like, every weekend they were looking for an RV show. Because he had to go, and what did he want to see in that RV? The bathroom. That's all he wanted to do, is see the bathroom in the RV. So I actually customized and got him a job at an RV center, and he detailed RVs, and he loves his job. I could just go on and on about, you know, finding ways that we can build relationships with a person is going to be based on their interests and their strengths, not on compliance. You're going to do what I want you to do, and we're going to have a friendship with that. Isn't that going to be grand? No, because the perspective from their point of view, it's what I want to do. And so, you know, taking or, you know, the fact that we are social individuals, we seek out socialization. Many people with autism, they don't seek out that socialization. So it's not a great big impetus for them.
I was just suggesting to my daughter that because my grandson had a bad experience at the dentist, that from now on, now that he's getting older, we could just tell him, hey, if you want him to be cooperative and easy, just have a vacuum cleaner. Every office has a vacuum cleaner there, and put a vacuum cleaner in there, and that could apply to anyone else. Well, within a reason, you know, not put a
Seriously.
motor home in the.
Right. Well, the other thing that what I was able to do with my son is they have suctions that are little vacuum cleaners. Because I'm thinking that's just like,
Oh, yeah,
he would
yeah.
have control over it. Say, I'll tell you when you can have, when we need to suction out your mouth. So that would be something that would be a very motivating, it's like, oh, I get to suction. And that they start off the first thing, just spray in their mouth, now clean it out for me,
Yeah.
spray it again. So you just keep doing it. It's just like, oh, now it's my turn. And then we can clean, now it's your turn. So
So thinking of how they would be more comfortable,
yes,
not what you
you
want.
just need to sit there while I clean your teeth, doggone it.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, and I will get into the story about my son. Although Michael liked vacuum cleaners, what was one of the biggest influence in his life was that my family were Catholic, and my daughter used to go, which is a whole subject of conversations now, but she's 40, that she's like, my mom made me go to a convent. I didn't make her go to a convent. It was a girls' club that she went to. And my son and I would go with her because it was in Portland, we lived in Vancouver. So at any rate, Michael was always around nuns in habits. And then the movie Sister Act came out.
Mhm.
And this one nun and Sister Act have been his life now for 31 years. And this convent we go to twice a week is what he lives for.
Oh.
And so when he would go to the dentist, knowing this, I would have, what we would do is we're gonna go to the dentist, you're gonna get your teeth cleaned, and then we're gonna go see Sister John at the convent. He would sit there and get his teeth cleaned. And the hygienist at the time, she also happened to be Catholic. And she was like, oh, you're gonna go to the convent? Which convent? And I told her where, and she's like, oh. And she said, well, what kind of, and I was like, I was saying the songs that you like out of Sister Act, and she's like, oh, I know that song. So she would sing
While she
this
was
song
doing
and
his-
clean his teeth.
Oh.
I mean, that is relationship development.
Yes.
That is, and it was, you know, she unfortunately has retired, like, really? But at any rate, that level of engagement, that level of tapping into a person's strength or interest is going to be invaluable in creating the opportunity of trust, which then leads to teaching and instruction. And then I think we've talked about this before, the difficulty with communication deficits, you know, the lack of conversational reciprocity, difficulty understanding nonverbal cues. So like what I was talking, when someone goes out and slams the door, it's like, oh, you know, we're gonna make a immediate judgment to say, I think you're mad at something. That person with autism is just like, that was loud. I mean, you don't see that there was an intention behind it. May have difficulty sharing a moment. Their language may sound like gibberish one day, and then another day, it's as clear and the formation is perfect. Have difficulties understanding concepts like under, over. And I'm always helping people that I, especially in transition age students, transition programs that are helping students understand that we can teach something to a person, but if they don't understand the concept, then we're missing the whole situation. For instance, one of the examples I gave is like, If we're teaching a person to make their own hot chocolate, we can teach them the whole process of making a hot chocolate. But if we don't teach them the concept of what full looks like, or how much chocolate we put into it, or what hot looks like, those concepts, unless we teach them, are going to be missed by the individual. Some days language is easy to understand for some, and on other days, completely not. Literal concrete interpretation, difficulty with volume control, cadence and intonation, may speak loud, very loud, or very monotone, or sometimes so softly you can't even hear them. May use repetitive use of known phrases. That's, for all the movies that my son has watched, one of the things that I can tell when he's getting upset and he doesn't like to be in a situation, he'll say, I'm melting, I'm melting. It's like, I think it's time to leave. May have large vocabulary, but not know what they're saying. So a person, similar to the young guy that was reading the Wall Street Journal, and yet we have some people that are talking about something, they have a large vocabulary. Maybe we might have the misunderstanding that they understand what they're saying, when in fact, they're just actually repeating what has been said about a topic. They have difficulty answering questions, especially open-ended. May have difficulty understanding idioms or sarcasm. Like I always say, kill two birds with one stone. Like, why do you want to kill two birds? There's an inference to it that a lot of people with autism don't get. Interesting enough, my son does get sarcasm because I use it a lot, which he actually laughs at it. So, and he knows when I'm using sarcasm. And then echolalia, basically the repetitive use of known phrases, or that they repeat what you are saying. And oftentimes, this is a scenario that I hear a lot of times is, whenever, Thomas goes over and pulls Mary's hair, I tell Thomas to tell Mary he's sorry. And he pulls her hair, he's sorry. And now when Thomas goes over and pulls the hair, he doesn't even need to be prompted, he just says, sorry. And that is how he has figured I can get her attention. So she will look at me, and then I tell him I'm sorry, because I've been trained, and this is basically through echolalia. We didn't teach them the concept of what sorry meant. Yes.
This is actually something one of the things that we're having trouble with is my son will say stuff, but he wants you to repeat it.
Right.
And if you don't, and a lot of the times it's okay, because we're at home, I know exactly what he's saying, because he says the same, he has like 3 or 4 different scripts that are exactly the same.
Yes.
But if we're out in public, or me and my mom are trying to talk to each other, and sometimes he will grab your face and he gets upset about it. And we're we've tried, stopping and telling, we've tried a bunch of different things. And he's big, he's almost 6'2", 250 pounds. So he's way
That's
bigger
my
than
guy.
me.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So when he grabs your face,
You pay attention.
and sometimes it's aggressive, you know what I mean? He never does anything that tries to hurt me, but some things he does do hurt me. Or he'll
Right,
put his,
not intentional, right?
yeah, just because he's really strong and all that. But yeah, sometimes, and it's if we don't, repeat what he says, then he will get angry. And sometimes we'll be okay, not right now, mommy's talking or whatever, and he'll be okay with it. And other times he's not having it.
And so that, again, and we know that all behavior is communication. Why is he trying to get your attention? And I'm gonna say that, there's gonna be different times. And like I said, sometimes you're gonna say, mom's talking in just a minute. Other times it could be that he is, it's looking at the environment, it's looking at, does this person know when, for instance, when I go take my son to the doctor, if I would just say, just a minute, the concept of just a minute is, I have no idea what that means. But if I set a time timer that says, when the red is gone, then I can talk with you. So it's giving that structured, literal interpretation. What does it mean? It could be as simple as putting out, like the young man that I worked with, as I put out Post-it notes. I said, when the Post-it notes are gone, then the bus will be here. And it could be the same for, I have 4 fingers. When my fingers are down, then it'll be time for us to go. So that he has the ability to watch the concept of time passing. And it could be as simple as also giving well, and I would imagine, like I said, not knowing the situation, my first thought is if he's able to be redirected by saying that on some occasions and not on others, I'm gonna say there is the need for structure predictability. And that, how long are you gonna talk? I want your attention right now. I need to leave. And, or I just want your attention right now. You have, the perspective from your point of view is, I need to talk with somebody. So I would even start off with, for instance, before you would go somewhere, we're gonna do a social story. And I do that actually whenever we go to the doctor's office, whenever I'm gonna be engaged, even at a grocery store, there are gonna sometimes be people that will talk with me. And I will give him tools to help him self-regulate his sensory needs so that I can do what I need to do. It takes time up front, but it's gonna save you pain, injury, and potentially, embarrassment and everything else that's happening during that time frame. Is I always prime him for what are the expectations and give him that structure of predictability. So he doesn't have to engage in an activity. And like I said, my guy is, 6'2" and he weighs 210 pounds. And although I'm tall and I'm not a slight person as you are, he still would overpower me. And that's something, obviously, I don't want that to happen. And he does have, he has support staff that knows the supports that he needs and can go in the community and do things with him. Because that was always my fear, is like, oh my gosh, he's gonna take somebody limb to limb. That is my fear. But when he knows that this is what I need to do, and I give him something that he can see that time is passing and teach him that concept. And I didn't just start that out in the community. I might say, I might set up for 2 minutes. I need to, when the red is gone, it's time for us to leave. So that he has control over it, and after 2 minutes, we're gone. So I practiced that. I taught a concept. I'm not gonna just go into, let's go into the store and I'm gonna be chatting with somebody and teach them. Teachable moments happen when a person's sensory system is relaxed. And so those are opportunities, like I said, it really is having the person does the person understand the function and the concept that you're trying to explain to them? Especially when you're saying, I'm getting this, it's like, that's not a teachable moment. And it's typically not the time where he's also gonna listen to what you're saying either. He wants you to do that now.
And he has the issue with expressing himself, so even when he does want something else, he's still gonna run through those,
Yes.
yeah. And then you'll be like, okay, is there something I can get you? I meet in those questions.
Yeah, it's open-ended.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I can do. Like I said, I don't know. It's always difficult to try to answer that, but like I said, concepts and structure and predictability are usually the first go-to things to helping a person understand, especially when we're wanting a person to wait. What does waiting mean? What does being patient mean? What does, in just a minute? We know of all things that infer, I need you to stand there while I'm talking, but we haven't expressed that to the person in the way that they could do something for themselves while you're finishing your conversation, and it's only gonna be limited, and then we can go.
I want to ask her a question. We're new at all of this, so we're like sponges. How do you know that he wants you to repeat what he said? So that we in turn someday will know that. How do you know that?
He's always kind of wanted us to repeat stuff. And I
And
don't,
the first time, how did you
I
know?
have no idea.
It becomes a social interaction, like
Yeah,
my son and
that's the only
I,
way our conversation.
he'll just come in immediately and we go into this scenario and we repeat it. And he's just like, it's like, if I went to Malay and say, hey, how you doing? You know, we have this, he wants to have that same conversation, but he only knows how to do it this way. And it gives him joy. You're engaged with me. I'm sorry, you're gonna say
Yeah,
something, Olivia.
my daughter, she would tell a joke and she would tell me the thing to say next, and I had to say it the exact same way that she told me to say it. And if I didn't say it the right way, we have to keep repeating it over and over. So they train you. They train you
Yeah,
to behave a certain way, and
That's
that's
very
very, very young.
But he also mocks
He
me.
talks louder. When
He
we're on the
uses
phone,
my
I'm not paying
voice.
attention, he talks loud.
Oh, he'll talk louder.
Well,
And he mocks you.
Yeah, like he knows when he does a certain behavior, he knows what I'm gonna say to him, and I'll look at him and he'll say like, stop it, be quiet, wait a minute. And but it's not in his voice, it's in mine, because he's like, he can mimic sounds,
Yes.
and he does it to my voice. And my mom's like, he sounds just like, and he's got like a deep man voice now, but he'll like change it to where it sounds like me.
Yeah, so- And what I say is like, actually, can be used
See, I don't have
in
it
a very
Yeah.
social way.
Yeah,
And that is
Just
the,
kinda
the way that you socially
trial and
interact.
error.
Yeah, I totally understand.
Thank you for being patient with us. It's just like, I just can't get enough of all this information. I want to learn so bad.
Well,
and
and
I
of course,
appreciate
everybody's different, so we're learning their way, but it might not be
So,
his
yeah,
way, which
so
I
what you
know
gotta-
now, but
But it's, you are learning concepts and characteristics.
yeah.
It could be either hyper or hyposensitivity, it could be, and it's just like, you know, just kind of taking the big tunnel and then refining it to say,
Well, and it
oh,
could be years later from now that I'll remember something she said
oh, for heaven's
that
sake,
doesn't apply today, but maybe down the road I'll think, oh, I remember.
Yeah.
in
Oh,
there.
Gloria, I mean, I'll do trainings and it's just like, I need to practice what I preach. It's just like ding, ding, ding.
I have a question though too that everyone here might answer. So you guys were talking about like communication, so Christian has echolalia, but he also understands a lot of it, so
Yeah.
we always tell him in Spanish, deja, that means leave it, when he's touching something.
Mhm.
So the funny thing is, we've been saying it, and he just learned how to open our refrigerator, our freezer, and it's like his height, so he, not even before he got there, he's like, deja, and went and opened it, and then shut it. So is he wanting me to say it, or is he just saying, she always tells me this when I come here, so I'm just gonna say it for her?
It's both. It's likely both. And so, but the concept is that, you know, he knows that and he's gonna get the response from you and that's what he's wanting.
So he understands why I'm saying it?
Yes,
Okay.
but the concept of why isn't there yet.
Okay.
Why can't I go in there? And sometimes, and at his level, his age level, it might be not something that we want to teach right now, but that, you know, for instance, what I have on, like for my son's computer in the morning, the first thing he wants to do is go to the computer. But instead of saying, because what happens when he gets onto the computer, he doesn't want to do anything else ever again during the day. So we have a stop sign on his computer. And then he's got a schedule. First we do this and then we do that. And then you have your choice. If you can do, if you want to do the computer, you want to draw, you want to paint, you want to do et cetera. That's your choice. But these are the things we need to do first. So that gives him the structure predictability, but it also gives him the structure predictability that I know I am going to have, this is going to happen. But having the stop sign is just kind of like that, oh, tells him what to do rather than what not to do. So there's, you know, you gotta look at first the chronological age, because any child the age of 2, they're gonna be doing that. Has nothing to do with his autism. It has to do that he's 2 years
I
old.
just think it's funny that he makes me laugh, but because he's so small and he's cute, but
Yeah.
just the way he just scolded himself and then went there and did it.
Yeah.
And then was scolding himself. I'm like, well, okay, well, you know why I'm telling you, you have to, you said it while you were, before you even went there.
And that could be a routine and could be like echolate, it could be a multitude of things, but you can tell he understands there's the cause and effect to that. It, again, the why, should I not be doing this, is not even something
He's,
chronologically or milestone wise, it's even where he should be at.
Yeah.
So, and that's like saying, oh, don't touch, it's hot, it's hot. Well, what does hot mean? Well, let's put your hand on it. No, we're not gonna do that. It's just we're gonna have, there's gonna be experiences, there's gonna be opportunities that person's gonna learn why. And for right now, it's,
he knows why, I mean, he doesn't know why, but he
Right.
knows the concept. Yeah.
Let me see his closing it again.
That's
He's not just leaving
He
it
opens
open.
it, he closes it.
so we also have people who have unusual resistance to change. Like the young man just won't, getting on the school bus was very distressing to him because he wanted the bus to go in the same direction. Matter of fact, if I go to the store, my son wants me to go to the same place, the same way, and I'll say, I want to go a different direction today. And then he's fine with it.
Oh, he tells you he wants to go in a different way?
Oh, he'll say it. And it's like, no, mom wants to go this way. Or this is kind of like, the lights are broken that way, so mom needs to go that way, and then he's fine. Okay, do a little line, but, it's like, otherwise, he,
You like everything the way it was yesterday,
yes,
tomorrow, and today.
Don't try to move furniture.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
wanna
We
have,
had one older kid that her whole day was scheduled in like 30 minutes. This 30 minutes we do this stuff, this 30 minutes we do that stuff.
Yeah.
There was a day where the Wi-Fi went out in our center and it just messed up her schedule entirely because her free time was doing a couple minutes on an iPad doing stuff. It stressed her out
Yeah.
horribly because her whole schedule was.
It does that to everybody, I think.
Yeah.
pretty much.
With the Wi-Fi. It's out.
But yeah, it just ruined her whole day, just
Yeah.
that one thing.
That's an unusual resistance to change. We have people who develop routines quickly, first-time learners. So we want to teach the person the first time the right way, rather than people think, oh, they'll learn from their mistakes. Nope, they will just learn to incorporate that mistake into what you're trying to teach them. May need to repeat things before moving on. Might be, I open their freezer, close it up, I open the freezer, close it up. May have one area of special interest that is highly developed. Again, those are what we've been talking about with different folks. We want to avoid power struggles. We want to create and build relationships based on what the individual's strengths and interests are. We want to provide functional communication supports, not yours, but the person with autism. We want to measure how do we assess the efficacy of the supports that we're using. If we're able to help the person refrain from engaging in negative behaviors, then we can do some assumption that this support has a positive influence. We need to just stop and ask, what need is going unmet? I refer to those teachable moments, the times and opportunity when the brain and sensory system are receptive to input. It's not in the time when we are in a struggle. I mean, similar to like with your son, it's like, this isn't the time when he's trying to get my attention. It's not a teachable moment. We need to be proactive rather than reactive. Easier said than done, but I can tell you, over, again, 38 years with my son, I have a book, I have social stories, I have his schedule, I have things that he can rely on that are in the car. I have a to-go bag wherever we go. It's something that he has that he can take with him. Matter of fact, if he has a pen and paper, he's good. Even to the point where I had to, he had a seizure, he tripped and he broke his foot. And this is right in the middle of COVID. So I had to take him to urgent care and try to help him understand why we need to wear a mask. Like, oh my gosh. So I'm doing the social story while he's in pain in the car. And then basically I did write a social story that said, we need to wear masks. Everybody needs a mask so we don't get sick. And so now the concept, what does sick mean? So it's like, sick can mean a lot of things. So I said, so rather than sick, I said, because we don't want to get bugs in our nose. That he got. I don't want bugs in my nose. It's like, when we go into the doctor's office, there are gonna be bugs and we need to wear a mask so the bugs don't get in our nose. He was like, all right. And actually, I had a mask on. I actually drew a bug on my mask and he'd be reaching for it. And I was like, and he's like, oh. I was like, and we were able to go in because it met his need. He understood it and we were able, that was something we did out in the car. I knew this was gonna be a huge ordeal. But we got through it and, I mean, to this day, he's still, I don't even have to say bugs. I mean, if we need to wear a mask, it's like, gotta wear a mask because we don't want bugs. And he actually laughs about it, says, all right. And then I hear people say, but I'm giving into their behavior. I can tell you by meeting someone's communication, this does not equate to giving into one's behavior. When the goal is to create teachable moments by reducing stress and anxiety, so the person can learn another functional, effective way to get their needs met, this is not giving into behavior. This is listening to what they're trying to communicate. And this, it's a mindset of, especially when kids are in school, is that, we all have, there's a social unwritten rule that we need to behave, we need to be compliant, we need to be socially the same as every other student. That doesn't always happen. How do we help a person understand what does it mean? What are the social rules in this building? What are the social rules within this classroom? Help me learn concepts that I don't understand. And it is by always trying to figure out what is it that a person's trying to communicate. And, just as Lori, you'd asked us, well, how do you know what he wants to say? Well, some of that is going to be through intuition. Sometimes it's just through, he has only said it probably a gajillion times. It's like, this is just our routine that we have. And other times I could just look by, as you could probably your own children, just by looking on their face exactly what they were meaning. And they didn't have to say a word.
Or if they lie.
Or if they lie, exactly. Those are all things.
When they lie.
It's all something that, oftentimes we can get into through intuition. But it's just like, I know this person, and like I said, taking opportunities when they're, I always say, when all the stars and moon align, those are teachable moments. When we've got, planetary disturbance and we've got, comets and meteors, this is not a time, or an eclipse, it's not a teachable moment.
Yeah.
And those are, some things that, this was for someone just the other day, it'll come to me, because it was like, it just spurred a thought that I had for, it was just, well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so implications of support to reduce misunderstandings that can lead to behaviors. And that could be, really the implications of support based on communication languages. Learn the communication strategies the individual is skilled in. For instance, we know that people, their eyes work better than their ears. So we want to make sure we have visual icons. We have things written or a range of communication devices that people can learn. Person learns best through structure and predictability, structure and routine. The person needs to learn the power of communication, the power of reciprocity, the power of inquiry, the picture exchange, or whether it's being able to verbalize something, pointing to anything rather than, I don't want to go somewhere and I drop it on melt on the floor. We want to have that opportunity that we can help this person learn the benefit and power of communication. Teaching strategies verbalization and imitation is not typically effective. We want to help a person just by teaching somebody to verbalize what you said and repeat it, just like echolate. It might mean that they're able to say it, do they understand the concept behind it? That we have to assess. We want to listen to the words or the lack of. Being unable to talk is not the same as having nothing to say. When someone says, what someone says is not necessarily what they mean. So like with your son, he might say something, but you know his intentions are different. We need to step back and look at the bigger picture. We need to probe for information and comprehension. And like I said, you can anticipate what he's needing even before, you know, he's gonna say something over and over again, and you're likely gonna know what his response is gonna be to that. And the reason why he's doing it. There's, like I said, even echolalia and the style of echolalia is all telling us something that even though it is not exactly demonstrating what they're feeling or how they're feeling, it's how they are saying it that you know what they're feeling. So probe for information and comprehension. You know, social judgment and social relating, you know, we talked about having poor eye contact or difficulty modulating behaviors to settings. Because it's interesting, you know, when you're outside playing and kids are, you know, screaming and yelling and talking to one another, and then you go in the classroom, there is now an unwritten rule that we need to be quiet. And now we still have Timothy, who is yelling and screaming and having fun. It's like, oh, the social parameters have changed. And we learn that oftentimes by social modeling. We learn that by what other kids are doing. And guess what? That is one of the deficits. That is one of the dyad of impairment, the pillar of social communication, understanding from somebody else's perspective. Oh, I need to be following what they're doing. They're not going to learn that through osmosis or through just exposure. We have to help them understand what that might look like. Might have peculiar affect and not consistent with contact. I mean, one that just happened to me the other day on Michael's schedule. On Thursday is our date night, and we always go out and have dinner and do stuff. And his support staff that was going to be there to stay with him overnight was supposed to be Brooke. And I had it on, it was up on the calendar, up on the schedule, and I was saying, Brooke's going to come and you're going to draw, and then you're going to go to bed, and they're talking about Brooke. And then Scooby starts barking, and the door opens, and it's Violet. And the look on Michael's face was just like you lied to me. You know, he didn't say it, but this was like, and I was like, oh Lord, you know, and I had to go through, and I had to do social story again, kind of a social story on the, you know, from his point of view that Brooke needed to get more sleep. She's going to be too tired. She's going to fall asleep and hit her head, you know, and he thinks that's funny. So Violet's going to be here so she can, because she's awake. So I did that in the social story, but I was just like, oh my gosh, it was one of those.
You'd be so creative.
Oh, yeah. In the, you know, I can't just say.
creative.
Yes, and knowing him, I know what, again, the concepts that he understands. I also know that he likes humor, and, you know, there are some things, like I said, you know, Brooke's gonna be so tired, she's gonna, you know, bonk her head on the table, and he thinks that's funny, that she's gonna bonk her head. So then we'll have to get a new table, and I kind of go on this thing, and he thinks it's hilarious, but at least I'm like, all right, I'm able to redirect him, and now he knows that Brooke's not gonna be here, but Violet is. So I go through, but, you know, for that social judgment, that individuals don't learn from just watching other kids, watching other people. That's what we do when we go into an environment. We start looking at how other people are behaving, and we start behaving the same way. For the person with autism, you know, I've had people with autism that I'll be doing a presentation, and I've got, you know, everybody's, you know, finding a place to sit, and they walk right up in front of me. You know, they're just like right here. It's like, they don't notice that everybody else is seated. You know, they're just like, I need your attention right now. I use proactive use of social narratives, social stories, basically, that provide the description, perspective, and information and direction. I won't get into that, but social stories are really important and we can, actually, could you put in social stories into the chat and then we can, and then real life implementation strategies with proactive supports. So like I said, when I know that I'm going into a situation that's going to be anxiety provoking for Michael, I'm going to make sure he's got information and concepts and things he can do for himself that are proactive rather than trying to teach him in the moment, because I know that's not going to work. Cognitive problems, we know that people with autism are concrete literal thinkers. Depending on the environment, can be slow to process information, can focus on details, slow pace, etc. So the implications of support would be that a person has extreme problems with generalization. So they need to be taught in each new situation with each new people and with new materials. So just because a person learned how to use the bathroom at home doesn't mean they're going to know how to use the bathroom and generalize that skill in a new bathroom. An example of that is a young child in kindergarten at home, had a bathroom, sink, everything was there, go to school. He wouldn't go to the bathroom, he refused to go to the bathroom, and they come to find out because the toilet seat, he said, was broken. Like, it's not broken. It's like he was insisting it was broken, but it was because it had the split in the front. So his one at home wasn't broken. He thought it was broken and he wasn't going to use it. So he would hold and be in pain. And the sink was one of the kinds that you step on the button and the water would turn on. Or they had ones you just put your hand under, and the ones at home you turn on. So it was completely disorienting for him. So we have to teach individuals in new situations with new people and new materials. We can't just think, well, they're going to generalize that skill to one place to another, because they're not. Utilize strategies to minimize problems with judgment, similar to the concept of do proactive supports, give extra processing time, highlight important information. Like I said, using something that I would have a routine of, this is what we're going to be doing. The highlighted important information is what's going to be motivating at the end of the day. This is what we're going to do. And at the end, like going to the dentist, we're going to go to the dentist, we're going to get our teeth cleaned, and then we're going to go to the convent. That was exciting. That was something that's highly motivating and very important for him to see. Concepts and cognitive understanding, the difference between clean and dirty. I've had people looking at the dirty, that it's in a glass and I drank out of it, means it is drinkable. So I had, this is an unfortunate, horribly unfortunate scenario, that a gentleman who left one of the institutions went to live in the community, and the house that he lived in ran out of laundry soap. So his staff went to the duplex beside him and said, can I borrow some laundry soap? And they said, sure. And they put it in a milk carton and they brought it back to the house. He drank the laundry soap, aspirated, and died. He didn't understand the concept that what's in a glass or what was in that jug was not milk. He didn't smell it, he didn't taste it, he just drank it. Difference between raw and clean, or raw and cooked. I had a young man, when someone said, you want to make sure that there's a flower on every table. Well, there were dead ones and he left them on the table. Why? It was a flower. You didn't say that it had to be a live flower, you just said a flower. So we have to be really specific about what we're saying. Providing choices, these are all things that we can help people and provide supports. Organizing and sequencing, doesn't know where to start, know what's next, know where to finish, know how long we're going to be doing it. We want to emphasize visual clarity and systematic or routine ways of doing something. with a visual support circle with it, because we can teach somebody to do something routinely over and over and over again until it's not a routine anymore and something else, is haywire, like the internet goes down. So we want to emphasize visual clarity and systematic or routines a way of doing something, but we also want to have a plan B. Because we always know, when I get in my car and go driving someplace, my first thought is, I'm gonna go from point A to point B and everything's gonna be fine. Well, what if I get a flat tire? I'm just like, knock on wood, I hope I don't. It's always interesting, driving up here, I'm like, see somebody pull over with a flat tire, it's like, I probably just jinxed myself. But at any rate, we have to be prepared for the what ifs. You might have somebody who's good at numbers or remembering, may have problems with language or abstract reasoning. Some people with autism can read, but they're not able to speak, so we can't make assumptions. It all, like what you folks are just saying, it needs to be an individual approach. Each person with autism is going to be different. We can look at the subsequent characteristics, but each person might be completely unique in how they experience it. We must assess a full range of skills and strategies. We can't assume skills in one area based on another. Just because a person has reading aptitude doesn't mean they have reading comprehension. If they have math aptitude, doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do story problems. So there's a lot of things that we cannot make assumptions over. Just because somebody is repeating it that says, I'm sorry, or that it's not that they're not being sincere, they haven't been taught the reason why I needed to say it in the first place. So the concept of sincerity hasn't been taught. Restricted repertoire behaviors focus on sameness, and ritualistic behaviors can be upset by change of environment, like furniture, holidays, new clothes, new food, moving, staff changes. Free time can be very difficult. The thing that we enjoy is, having some downtime. But for a person with autism, work is play and play is work. They want and need structure because it's, they have difficulty organizing and sequencing their time. And oftentimes they will revert back to what they know, vacuum, vacuum, vacuum. Or, in my son's case, it's just gonna be, where he's gonna draw one thing over and over and over again. That's something that he will do when he gets very stressed or anxiety, has anxiety with it. Will memorize the world, is easily upset and confused, will develop elaborate rituals, have difficulty making choices. And the implications of sports are that work is easier than leisure or downtime. Having something to do and having the structure and predictability and how long I'm going to do it and what's next is what is important for that person. We need downtime. We need time that we can unplug and just go. But our brain is thinking of other things. Do you have a question? Comment?
Not really, just an example. So for a lot of, at least at our center, a lot of kids, they don't like the free time, or they have the specific things they do because it's their slice of control, the thing that they know.
Yes.
I can do this, it's the same, like the repeating the phrases.
Yeah.
He might do it when he's feeling a little bit stressed because he knows I can get somebody to repeat it back to me.
Yeah.
And it gives them that reassurance that, okay, there's still something here that I know.
So how do the young folks, like our great grandson, my great grandson, his mother, her daughter, my granddaughter, wants to take him trick or treating. Well, we like him to be, she and I both agree, that we like him to be on a schedule and a certain thing.
Yes.
And the mother is young, I think she wants to use him to get candy for herself and her.
Because he doesn't eat candy, first of all.
He doesn't eat candy, so are we being controllers if we just say to her, because I told her, he could come and stay the night at my house, I'll take him to school in the morning and you go hardy, whatever. But I just see him out there in the dark with all these spooky different things, and I know,
Well, I just think though, of a 2-year-old, that could be overwhelming. I mean, for, like I said, a neurotypical 2-year-old, you might go to just family.
that's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
With
see,
the-
that's why I just want him to hand out candy with me and my
Yes,
husband sitting
yes,
out
yes.
in our front yard that he's comfortable with, dressed up, but just handing out candy.
Yes.
We went across the street and that was it, just so you have the experience of trick or treating.
Well, how
And
do
you
we?
can't go like down, like,
Yeah, they wanna go
More
in
than
a
my
cousin's
house.
neighborhood to go
No,
do
no.
all of that
Ooh.
no,
stuff.
no, no.
No. That's silly.
I was gonna say, I work with the agents, I mean, is he gonna be able to handle somebody jumping out in his face?
No, right.
The smoke machine,
No.
and you gotta think it's dark.
Yeah,
Is he
no.
going to take off running and you be able to catch up and get a hand on him? I mean,
Maybe your
Well,
daughter wants to see him in a costume and say, okay, let's have him dress up in a costume, take the picture, but I don't think that trick or treating at his age is a good idea.
Yes.
We
Just
don't
not
mind
here.
during the day trunk or treat.
No, it'll
stuff
be-
is-
Yeah.
It'll be a
if it was-
night
If it
for-
was the daytime,
It's more for them, the teenagers, the young
They're not
people.
teenagers, they
Well-
still want candy, and they're like, oh, we got a little kid to get it for us. He doesn't need it.
No,
no.
Yeah, I
I
think you
strongly suggest that she should use it.
Well, maybe you guys can kidnap her, but no.
We'll make a plan.
No.
Like, no.
We're being recorded.
That's on tape too, so.
And it's
You're
right
right.
on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, I forgot, it's on the out there.
Yeah, there you go, Maureen.
Oh.
So we know that the implication is easier than leisure time. Person needs predictability, routines that are developed. So even like holidays, like I said, those could be very disorganizing and very, very alarming for any child. Now let's put a neurodiverse autism diagnosis on top of it. And just, chronologically, his age at 2, there are things that you would certainly want to take into consideration that would, regardless of the autism, that he's 2, all children benefit from structure and predictability. That this happens to be a special day, that handing out candy with grandma or great grandma, that's a great thing. Going to bed at a regular time, and so that they can get up and go to school, that's the important part. Right. Easier said than done, right? Yeah.
Well, with her. Okay.
So we've got sensory and perception problems, inconsistent response to sound, distractibility, over and underreactive. Pretty much what we're talking about now of just going trick or treating. Talk about the inconsistent response to sounds, could be over or underreactive, stare at lights, all the things, and they're the licks and smells, and that was, really for Michelle, is that a person who licks and smells. This is a sensory perception problem. We want to minimize distractions, highlight important elements of the environment or the activity, like giving out candy, having something special on that day, like, a cupcake that he can't have that's gluten and casein
I bought his
free.
own candy that's all gluten, dairy free, so
Oh,
I don't,
nice.
like, I was just gonna switch the baskets. Here's yours, here's the one you got for your mom.
Yeah.
Right. Structure a sensory diet with strategies throughout a daily schedule, which, isn't a whole lot different than perhaps you or I would do. Is, during our day, we want to have times that we stand up, we stretch, we maybe go for a walk, we need to have some downtime. We need, as I said, people with autism, work is playing, play is work, and the need for structure. We can structure sensory activities throughout a person's day, even have like a sensory room or a sensory opportunity. Maybe instead of candy, that he actually gets fidgets, something that he can play with rather than getting candy.
Stickers.
Stickers, all those things that can help more with the sensory processing rather than perhaps just a taste. So here's the iceberg analogy, and this, we're gonna go through this pretty quick because, like I said, there's a lot of detail here in this that, it's just, it's a lot of information. But at any rate, TEACH, which is the treatment and education of autistic and communication-related handicapped children, which is what TEACH stands for. Then we look at the specific behavior. What is it? You know, for example, the person's angry, outbursts, shouts, rude, shouts out rude comments to other children, or like Michelle said, licks herself. The underlying difficulties could be poor understanding of the social rules, poor communication skills, unaware of other people's feelings, inappropriate reaction to others, sensitivity to noise, oversensitive to activity, to crowds, anxiety about change in lesson, the lack of social interaction skills, anxiety, confusion in a unstructured setting, overload of sensory stimuli. So what we see as this analogy is portraying is that we only know the tip of the iceberg. We don't know what really is going on and what is really resonating, what is causing this behavior. So you look at, you know, for instance, this is a student 15 years old. She has refusal to participate. She expresses herself rudely, stating that she hates X, Y, or Z, stating that no one helps her or no one listens, etc. So when we look at this whole iceberg, and like I said, this is a whole lot of information, and it's a process that is used. You'll see over to the right, it says iceberg analogy and UCC. The UCC is the underlying characteristic checklist that is available, as you see on the bottom, by Ruth Aspie, which I think is
This is so
interesting.
funny.
That's her last name, Aspie. That's what people with Asperger's said wanted to call her Aspies. And Barry Grossman with the Ziggurat program in Texas. And basically it goes through really looking at the underlying characteristics and determine through the underlying characteristics, basically it's a functional assessment to figure out what could be the hypothesis to this behavior. And what it does, it gives us an opportunity to figure out and eliminate, you know, basically what I would say what practicing medicine is like, is you rule out. This is the symptoms, okay, this is what we're gonna test for, we rule that out. Okay, here's the symptom, this is what we're gonna test for, we'll rule that out. And it's a process, and it's trying to figure out, based on the underlying characteristic, why is this person engaging in this activity? Then we might have somebody who has restricted interests and behaviors, may have preoccupation with a single topic, upset with changes, fussy about sounds, foods, and clothing, flips objects, flaps hands, unusual body movement, repeats questions, intense fixation on unusual things. What's under the underlying of the tip of the iceberg is limited in imagination, can be overwhelmed by minimal changes, can be highly sensitive to environmental stressors, attracted to sameness, poor concept of time, fatigue, obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors, anxiety increased when faced with anything new. So you have what a person is preoccupied with and what the underlying issues could be is, like I said, the tip of the iceberg, and really what's underneath the iceberg is what we need to look at and rule out. I'm not gonna go through this. I'm gonna go through, yes, we've got 7 minutes. So this is really kind of looking at the functional behavior, and I want to go through this so you can see, this is really one of the things that I did for my son, and this is when he was in high school, and it has been continued to evolve. So it's the supports through observation and knowledge, because I can tell you my observation and knowledge of Michael is going to be much different from, say, a new job coach who comes in who's never met him before, or a new teacher that comes in who's never met your son or daughter before. It's just like, their understanding, and for instance, it could be like Michelle had said, her daughter licking herself is like, well, I think she's doing this intentionally to get people's attention. Well, shaming a person is not a positive attention that people typically seek out. If she gets upset, if she really wanted the attention, she wouldn't react in the way that she had. So doing this process could be having an A day, meaning that everything is going well. That's often used the majority of the time, using structure, visuals. It's the primary plan that addresses the following areas, such as physical structure, visual predictability, skills or concepts that need to be built or taught, independence, alternative behaviors, relationship techniques, staff training, and medical care. These A day are teachable moments, are days and times that we can teach. A B is a reactive plan. And it is the object of the reaction plan is to reduce the likelihood of further escalation and get the person back to an A. It clearly identifies the early warning signs that often leads to dangerous behaviors and implements and encourages the alternative behaviors. Quick reinforcement and or staff changes coupled with decreased demands are often primary components. Then you have C, crisis plan. It's clearly identified as dangerous behaviors as well as response of the caregiver. The only objective is to keep people safe. Then we have the recovery plan. Is designed to assist and support a person through their de-escalation and post-crisis depletion. The goal is to minimize stressor and create an environment where the person can rest and relax. The plan clearly identifies at which point plan A activities are to be reintroduced. So supports, strategies, and help is on the way. A, B, C, D are what we can put together. And I'm going to run through this very quickly. Just to show you what we've done for Michael. So this is my Michael. So what does this all look like for Michael? Well, this is supports that we're talking about. And this is him having A, B, C, D type of day. Having an A day. What does he look like? He smiles, absence of body tension, level voice tone, quick to laugh at people's jokes, stands with stomach out, his arch, his back is kind of arched, head cocked to one side, makes eye contact. So if you look at Michael in this picture, I mean, that really kind of demonstrates head's cocked to one side, he's smiling and making eye contact. That's a good day. On a day that things are kind of going sideways, what does Michael look like physically? He has increased anxiety, seizures, and transitions are difficult. He might have a loud, cackly sound. And so again, Gloria, just what was your name?
Emily?
Emily. But when you ask Emily, how do you know? Well, it's when you start writing things down. What does the person look like? What do they sound? What would their facial expression be? These are the things that were important that I needed to write down because I knew it, but other people didn't know. So I looked at what does Michael look like, physically, and I would go through, each one having an A day, a B. What is a crisis? What does the supports look like? What does Michael look like emotionally? Again, the same thing. We went through A, B, C, D type of scenario. What does he look like in different locations? Around people, like a home, around in at the store, work, or library. And then what does that look like when he's having a B day? We want to avoid noises and chaos. So it gives a person a more defined description of what Michael's able to do. And so it goes through, doing activities around people. What does he look like? That a picture is worth 1,000 words. We can tell people over and over again, but if we're able to put things in pictures and in videos, we can show a person who they are. Because when you put a face to it rather than a behavior, people start looking at that differently. The bottom right is my daughter and my son, Molly and Michael. And just helping people understand who he is, what he's able to do. There are his nuns, as you can see, what he loves to draw.
The dog's so cute.
Scooby,
We have
yes,
a doodle too.
he is. Oh, do you? Yeah,
Mine's a girl though, but she's, looks very similar to that.
yeah. Goofy little animals, I tell you.
Except for your son.
It was supposed to be, but
I don't
then
know.
she became it didn't quite work out as planned.
Mom needs help here.
Yeah, I bought her for him, but they didn't connect, but she
Ah.
became my magnet.
So she needs my help.
Is his
So-
sister and him really close?
Yes,
And she probably can get him to do things a lot of people don't, like he acts different around her, right?
oh, yes. And she's, I mean, in essence, she was his other parent. His really care provider, because wherever they went where I wasn't, she was. So childcare and everything, she was it was nice, it gave me some solace. She probably around college was very resentful. Like, I didn't have a life, I didn't have a childhood, I didn't have blah, 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 blah. She has come big full circle to the point where she and her husband, who have literally lived around the world, have decided to move back into Washington State because she knows I'm not getting any younger. And she wants to be here in Washington State so she can take a little bit care of Michael.
Now, does she have, do they have kids?
Molly does, yeah, she's got 3 kids. She
And
her
how
husband.
are the kids with Michael? How is Michael with them?
Yeah, they're good. They're very good. When they were babies, I have pictures of them and they're all like, what is this? I mean, they could not figure him out. I mean, because most people are like, oh, hello dear. And he's just like, I could really care less if you things were not.
He doesn't even look at us.
He loves to watch them and he talks about them. He talks about his nieces and his nephew, that he's Uncle Michael. And, and we're now working on having opportunities, instead of everybody always going to his house, he's going to be start going to Molly's house. Molly lives in Gig Harbor now, so we'll be, yes, it is very nice. So it is past 4 o'clock,
Okay.
and like I said, I had a lot of information that was.
Good information every time.
But we'll get this emailed, right?
No, yes,
Yeah.
yes, she gave me the link to that
The Google.
slide,
Mhm.
and it's easier to see on the computer.
Yeah, I'm thinking, like, I can read this. And my eyes aren't that bad, but that's.
No, those are-
nobody
it
can
is
read that.
small.
It's just a black and white.
So just wish me luck in talking to my granddaughter about Halloween.
Well, and like I said, don't even bring up the subject of autism. Just bring up the subject, 2-year-olds.
Yeah.
This is just an early exposure to something that should be a lot limited.
It's the beginning of a really fun tradition, because a lot of autistic people love Halloween,
Oh, my gosh.
but at 2 years old, any 2-year-old would have.
I don't know if she'll go for if I don't bring up the autism
I
because.
think the autism will be the only way.
That it's a little convinced.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Then
we
there you
know
go.
her.
You know that.
Yeah, we know her too well.
So
Yeah,
thank you
just
all. I
probably
appreciate
not
you
in front of the
participating.
Probably just gonna-
You will receive a link again to the Google Drive, which has a document for this training. And I appreciate your participation and obviously yours as well. I'm not ignoring you. So
No.
in the meantime, have a great rest of the week. What is today? Tuesday? Oh my goodness, it feels like it's Thursday. Anyway, we have rain this weekend and I'm so excited it can't come in sooner. So
We have rain.
Rain.
rain is coming.
I hope so.
Supposed to be
Oh,
for like
wow.
7 days straight.